I'll ask that the bailiff call the producer from courtroom television, have that individual up here in the courtroom. Okay, great. All right. And what is the matter here that counsel want to discuss outside the presence of the jury?
On the interview notes of Alan Anderson, it's a 3-page report dated April 27th.
Yes.
And that, with respect to my first objection, counsel has indicated she will not use that particular reference. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And as to the second one, she will not use. The third one, she is going to elicit specifics about the consequences to the brothers. As to the fourth objection, she will not use the first sentence, first two sentences.
First 2 lines. One sentence. First 2 lines.
And she intends to ask about what Kitty did in getting mad. On the second page, she intends to use, I objected on basis of relevance that Kitty Menendez had complained about this young man eating too much. I don't see the relevance of that.
Is your mic on? I can barely hear you.
No, it wasn't. This is with reference to the first objection on the second page. I object on the basis of relevancy to that, and there's a dispute as to whether or not that's relevant.
All right, well, let's deal with it right now.
Okay.
What is the defendant's position, why it's relevant?
Yes, Your Honor, our position is that in this family, there were a series of rather bizarre rules about food. They included the fact that what you got for dinner, if you didn't eat it, you had it for breakfast or lunch the next day. That when the boys were taken to play tennis for 6 hours at a time, no food was brought along, only water and iced tea so that they wouldn't throw up. That they were very controlled about what they ate and when they ate, and that there were whole strategies about what was appropriate eating so that you could win. And that this idea, all of the people who stayed in the home experienced the same thing, which is they weren't allowed to go get food when they wanted. And it was a very controlling and sort of abusive situation where you have Alan Anderson, our first witness, was 16 at the oldest when he stayed in the house. He was there a number of summers. And he's denied access to food. And it's obviously our position that this is a very controlling and unusual family, and that this is one of the ways of demonstrating. It's a very brief incident.
All right, the objection is sustained. The issue is not controlling and unusual. The issue is the specific acts of abuse that were experienced by the defendants, and whether people might have had some peculiar ideas about things in general is not the issue here, but the specific conduct that relates to the defendants is that issue, and therefore the objection is sustained. It's not relevant.
I believe that incidents which take place I believe that Dr. Greer testified that incidents that take place in front of the defendants have an impact on them. If it's abuse of another person in the household, that it has an effect on them. And so we would be asking to elicit incidents that occurred in the presence of the boys as they were growing up. Now, if it turned out that it didn't happen in the presence, obviously we wouldn't use it.
Well, in this instance, there is nothing to show it did, number one, occur within the presence of the defendants. And secondly, the court will expect the defense to use some discretion in eliciting this sort of information so that it doesn't become cumulative and irrelevant by reason of repetition. That all sorts of things could happen and could happen in front of a child. And just because we have somebody come up here and testify that things have to happen in front of a child could have an effect on an individual doesn't mean they had any effect on the defendants in this case. And at this point, this is all being presented to the court in the abstract. We have no information as to what they did or did not perceive, and we certainly don't have any information as to what happened on August the 20th, 1989. So at this point, we're getting a very detailed picture, perhaps, of individuals' lives, but it has to focus on the issues in this case. And at this point, the objection as to the family's attitude towards Mr. Andersen and his eating habits, as described in this document, is irrelevant, and the court sustains the objection.
The second objection I had on that page is on relevancy grounds as well. Mr. Andersen indicated that he would do chores and he wasn't appreciated for doing those chores. I think that's irrelevant.
I think it's, Mr. Priyama understates it. It's a situation in which he's afraid to do anything without specific permission, including mowing the lawn or doing things that he perceives to be helpful. This does take place in front of the boys. They do see when he tries to do something that he is yelled at for doing it without permission, which is similar to the experience that happened to the boys, but these things happened in front of them. And with regard to incidents that happen in front of them, obviously that's going to be our position that they do have an impact, and we are going to put on additional experts who will take that position. And if the jury wants to reject the idea that early childhood experiences of seeing something else happen in front of them don't matter, I think they can reject it, but it's our position that we have at least a right to present it to them for their review.
Well, the court's position is that there will have to be some limits to it. We're certainly at the first witness to testify about such things. So at this point, it's premature to rule on any cumulative aspect to it. But I want to alert you to the fact that when you put on this evidence, you better be aware of what evidence you intend to put on in the future so that we don't get into a situation of cumulative evidence. Every time someone picked his nose and the father slapped the hand is not going to be before the jury, and there's going to have to be some relevance to it, and also some reason and logic given to the nature of the evidence being produced here, so that we don't get into a cumulative aspect of testimony.
I understand.
So I'm inviting you to review this witness's testimony in light of all the other witnesses you intend to call, so that we don't get into a situation of repetition and duplication and cumulative evidence that will be the subject of exclusion later on. If you feel there's something better coming up later that you'd rather have than something you're putting on earlier in your phase of the case, then maybe you ought to look at decisions in that regard. Right.
Understand.
As to the third objection, counsel has indicated she will not use that information. Is that correct, counsel?
What I indicated was that I'm not going to use this specific information. I was going to ask him to just generally describe the personalities of the two boys, which he can do in 2 sentences apiece.
All right.
As to the fourth objection, on relevancy grounds, she will not use
No, I indicated I want to use
this one, the
first.
That's that one.
On the right.
Oh, you've got this.
You said you will
Is
not
this match?
use.
Oh, okay. So okay, we did Pamela. I thought you meant this too.
No.
Just this?
Yes.
Oh, I agree with that one. That's not a problem.
Okay, and as to the last objection on that page, Your Honor, it's also based on relevancy.
Your Honor, our position is that, well, there's 2 objections stated here. One is the relevancy. And since the prosecution seems to be making an issue about whether there's any complaint to verify that conduct actually occurred, it's our position that's highly relevant that at this young age, Lyle was asking his older cousin to intervene on his behalf and talk to his father about how he punishes him. And so, that's a complaint from the time, and we think it's very relevant. And Mr. Byrd, I think, is prepared to address the hearsay objection because this comes up again with other witnesses.
All right. Is the people's objection on grounds of relevancy or hearsay?
It's both. I've listed both hearsay and relevancy, and we're talking probably 15 years ago that this supposedly took place.
Well, that's the defense theory, that this occurred over a long period of time. And that's why they're offering it. as far as the hearsay aspect of it, why is it, if it's offered to show the state of mind of the declarant, why would it be hearsay?
Well, state of mind is an exception to the hearsay rule. So if it were offered simply to show the state of mind, it would not be hearsay. Well, it would be hearsay with an exception to the hearsay rule.
Is that why the defense would be offering it?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, the court would permit it.
As to the final page of the April 27th statement, in the middle of the page, I have an objection on the left column or margin. The defense has indicated they will not use that reference. The left side.
Yeah, I know, but this isn't marked. This is only like it's marked. I assume that that's what you meant. That's highlighted, which is your stuff, but this is marked.
Do you have the original? Oh, that went to the court. Okay. Will not use, they seem to think. Is that what you're
Right,
referring to, counsel?
that's what you marked. I
Okay.
assume that was your objection, and I agreed that I would not use that.
Okay, and the next objection, you want to, well, I objected on the basis of speculation, Your Honor, and counsel stated that she wishes to use specific examples.
Yes,
So-
I agreed with him that it's conclusionary and speculation, and I intend to just have him describe specific things he observed
All right.
rather than concluding.
Okay, and as to the final, or actually, there's two more objections. On speculation grounds, on the left margin, counsel says she wants to use,
Where are you now? What's the first word?
Ellen described Kitty,
Okay.
and she wants to use, and I'm not sure what she's going to do with
What I
that.
want to do is just put on what he observed in terms of the change in the family when Jose came home, what the family did, how they responded, how the behavior changed when he was there as opposed to when he wasn't there.
Do you have any objection to that?
Here, I objected to the speculation that he used, that putting on a mask,
I don't
it's
intend to
his.
use that phrase.
All right, she's not going to use that phrase. She said she wants to have description of any change in behavior once the father arrived in the house. Do you have any objection to that?
No.
Also, with regard to the last line on that page, he remembered Kitty always being right and that she drove recklessly. The always being right part I was not concerned about, but I do intend to have him describe some reckless driving that takes place with the boys in the car.
Here, I objected on that on relevancy grounds.
I'd be happy to make an offer of proof. This is just not somebody who speaks a little bit. It's somebody who goes out for what she calls thrill rides with her children in the car.
Well, I'd have to hear that as far as what it is that the witness would be describing. If somebody,
There are, I can describe to the court right now, or if you
All
want
right.
to hear from the witness.
well, if you have an offer of proof that you feel is going to be reflective of his testimony.
The offer of proof is with regard to two specific instances, which he will say happened a number of times, but there are two specific instances he remembers. One is he will describe behavior of Kitty where she all of a sudden seems to just, her eyes glaze over, she doesn't hear you, she doesn't seem to respond, she seems to be totally distracted and thinking about something else.
Sort of like jurors occasionally.
Absolutely. And the behavior that he will describe, which will be the same behavior the boys will describe, is when it happens when she's driving and all of a sudden she's not focusing, and there's a particular incident he remembers where they're driving down the street, they're driving fast because she always drove fast and took chances, and they're headed right to an embankment. And at the last minute, they scream and scream to get her attention, and she turns the wheel at the last minute, and the car goes up on the embankment. That's one incident. And the other one is when they go for rides. She says to Alan and the two boys, "Let's go for a thrill ride." And they get into their car at the time, and she starts driving excessively fast. Nobody has seatbelts. Everybody's being thrown around in the car. And at one point, she loses control of the car, and it does a 360-degree spin. And she comments about, "Wasn't that fun?" And it's part of our position that this type of behavior is terrorizing and frightening, and made the children obviously had to go in the car with her. This was something that recurred, and they will testify to similar
driving experiences, one in which she drives on the wrong side of the road head on into traffic. And so our position is that she was unstable, engaged in bizarre and dangerous behavior, and that these are specific examples of that type of conduct.
People want to respond?
Your Honor, the objection that I made is based on the reports that we've been provided with. I've heard nothing of this until this moment regarding the offer of proof. It didn't appear in any of these reports. And is counsel saying that this witness will testify to those incidents?
Yes. These are my notes of the interview. I mean, when I put, she drove recklessly because I didn't write down every single incident that came up. I think I've turned over to them 10 or 11 typewritten single-space pages of notes of the interview. I tried to make it as detailed as possible.
What is your response to the specific offer of proof?
I would still object to that as being irrelevant, Your Honor.
When did this happen?
When his last visit is in 1977. And he visited for 2 to 3 summers prior to that, although not consecutive summers, and he's not absolutely positive of the years, but he can identify them by the houses. So in 1977, Lyle would have been 9, and Eric would have been 6.
And you propose to offer other witnesses testifying about similar behavior of the mother?
Yes.
Over the years, both before and after, and similar reckless driving with the children unseatbelted. And the children's expression over the years of fear of driving with their mother.
Well, it's hard to factor this into the defense, quite frankly. That's the court's concern here. The defense reacts to the court's observation incredulously, but it seems that every event that's ever happened in the lives of the defendants is fair game as far as the defense is concerned, and the court doesn't view it that way. This is not a novel where someone's life history is put before the jury. This is a trial, and there has to be some concerted effort to limit the scope of the evidence. And my concern is that we're embarking upon evidence and presentation of evidence that really has no relevance.
If I could link up the relevance, Your Honor.
Yes.
The experts in the field of psychological maltreatment will testify that there are 6 identifiable forms of maltreatment, one of which is terrorizing, and the impact of terrorizing, of being exposed to dangerous behavior, and what it does as a child grows up, the fear that they have in the world. And I think Dr. Greer talked about hypervigilance, the idea that the world is a dangerous place to be, and always looking for clues to danger and looking for ways to avoid danger. And so incidents early on, or incidents throughout their childhood, in which they are exposed to danger, when they are intentionally exposed to frightening experiences, life-threatening experiences, contributes to their view of the world and whether they're going to perceive events at the end, August 20th, as life-threatening based on a lifetime of experiences with parents where they have been exposed repeatedly to danger. And it shows a willingness of the parents to engage in this type of behavior, and it's that ultimately it affects the defendant's state of mind.
As I said, the defense has not presented to the court their theory of what occurred on August the 20th. The defense in its opening statements was rather circumspect and not dealing with the events that night. And the court's concern is, and question is, whether or not all of these things that you're telling us about and relating and the offer of proof here really relate to what happened that night. I have no way of evaluating this in the abstract. I don't know what your theory of what happened that night is.
I think Ms. Abramson and I both, although we didn't go into great detail, indicated that at the time this occurred that they felt that their parents were about to kill them.
Well, I heard that said, but I didn't hear anything about the specifics of what the beliefs were and what the specific acts or activities were that would cause anyone to have such beliefs.
I think-
And that's really ultimately going to be the issue in this case, not what happened at age 6.
But it's a question, if you see that same behavior demonstrated by people who have been kind, loving, and protective of you all of your life versus seeing that behavior by people who have endangered your life and abused you all your life, you're going to read it differently.
It depends on what behavior you're talking
Well,
about. I haven't heard that behavior described. That's a
And
problem.
what it goes to is obviously one of the areas we would be asking for instructions in would be manslaughter. And they're the two prongs of the reasonableness of their belief, and secondly, the good faith issue with regard to their belief. Did they really believe it was going to happen? And it is our position, and I think the case law supports this, that the experience they have contribute to their honest belief with regard to interpreting the events that are taking place. And I would point out to the court that we did have the prosecution witness early on, Mr. Anderson, I believe, who was the boat captain, who talked about the night before that these boys are huddled at the front of the boat. They're getting drenched with water. They seem to be in fear. They won't get near the parents. And so it's our position that there is ample indicia of the fact that they were afraid and that there is a lifetime experience to back it up.
Your Honor, let me just interject one thing. You know, I look at you incredulously, and you look at me with disgust, but well, our experts will testify that these kinds of terrorizing experiences on young children don't just build up over the years or get stored as memory. That children faced with later in life, even as adolescents, even as young adults, when they're faced with a situation where the person who has terrorized them appears to be threatening, they re-experience these earliest traumatic events. Now, a very important component of why they were afraid of their mother is because over the entire course of their life, she was reckless with their lives. She put their lives on the line. And that has a great deal to do with the driving. Her wild driving is given. Every single person who knew her says that she was a wild and reckless driver. And other family members who drove with her were afraid. Adults were afraid to get in the car with her. These children drove with her every single day, and it was a constant source of terror. It created in them a fear of their mother and a terror of her behavior because she did not take care of them in these situations. And it is a very important part of the evaluation of all of our experts. Now, they're the ones who understand this field, and they have no doubt that this aspect of her endangering her children was a serious component in why they were capable of believing that she would kill them in the long run. She was not a soft, sweet, protective, cooing mommy. She was scary, and this was part of her scariness. So it does link up. I mean, obviously, we're not going to put on 18 years of every time they got in the car with her. It just forms a pattern, but these young experiences were the most traumatic and the most significant. And this is an eyewitness to those. When it comes to her everyday reckless driving, there aren't eyewitnesses beyond the defendants whose credibility, no doubt, will be attacked in every possible way by the prosecution.
You know, I would also interject an objection under Evidence Code Section 352. I suppose these young men could say that their mommy said that she was gonna take them for the drive on August 20th, and that would tie everything in. But I think with no tie-in, this is simply irrelevant in this case.
Could I ask one question?
Yes.
Which is the discussion so far is focused on, or seems to have focused on the self-defense or imperfect self-defense theories. But as we pointed out to the court in the response we made to the prosecution's motion to eliminate, there is also a heat of passion theory here. And we cited to the court the Wharton case, People versus Wharton, by the California Supreme Court, indicating that provocation can be shown by acts over a long period of time. And the court deals there with what it calls a long, continued provocatory conduct on behalf of the victim, and describes the defense in that case and endorses the defense description. It was the defendant's theory of trial that no single action on the part of the victim provoked the fatal blow, but that the last incident was merely the culmination of his pent-up frustration and anger emanating from his ongoing dysfunctional relationship with the victim. And if the court takes that theory and looks at the Calgic manslaughter instructions, the Calgic manslaughter instructions talk in terms of provocatory acts as being something that go far beyond acts of violence. Words alone can be provocatory acts under the instructions the jury is going to hear. So I think if the court thinks in terms of heat of passion, that that's an additional theory which justifies admission of evidence which might not rise to the level of acts of violence supporting a theory of self-defense. I think the heat of passion theory is much more flexible and allows for a much greater scope of evidence than perhaps some of the other theories the court is focused on. So I'd ask the court to take that into consideration as well.
And also, if
All right,
this
let
is-
me just respond to this. At this point, number one, I don't endorse or adopt the characterization of Ms. Abramson as to my response to her individually or as she has described it. My observation of the incredulity of defense counsel is an observation of the reaction of counsel, very vivid reaction to remarks I was making as I was making them. In regards to the statements here, again, what the court is alluding to is the cumulative potential of the evidence that is being offered, that this could go on for a long period of time of evidence being presented that is duplicative and not really in dispute. And I doubt very much if the prosecution is going to dispute the details of what it is that you're offering here, because they certainly would not be in a position to do that, since the only witnesses to these events are those that will be testifying. The court's concern is that counsel have given the court a time estimate of how long they expect the defense to take. And that time estimate, I have to assume, encompasses quite a bit of this type of evidence. And there is the law of reason that must at some point rear its ugly head and deal with how often or how much of this evidence you intend to introduce as far as this childhood history. It cannot be presented in such a way as it consumes an undue amount of time, or Evidence Code Section 352 would apply, and the court would preclude such evidence being introduced as you get to that point. And as I've already said, my suggestion to counsel is to review this material and start editing to resolve that concern so that we don't get into undue repetition and duplication of this sort of thing. Secondly, in regards to Mr. Burt's position of heat of passion, sudden quarrel and heat of passion certainly doesn't have to arise in a short period of time. However, as events become more remote, they become less relevant to that issue, and there is no case law that stands for the proposition that some event, isolated event that occurred 20 years prior to the killing somehow would be a grounds for a manslaughter finding in a case. It has to be something a little more immediate than that. So although there is merit in general to the idea that a history of a relationship can have bearing on the theory of provocation, and provocation can have bearing on not just whether a charge is manslaughter and whether or not it is also a factor the jury can consider on the theory of reducing a charge from first degree to second degree murder based on provocation, impairing the ability to premeditate and deliberate in some fashion. So this is an area that can be developed I'm just expressing concern about the potential cumulative aspect of the evidence. In regards to this specific discussion that we have been referring to relating to this driving and the behavior of the mother in the specific instances that have been described by Ms. Lansing, it could be perceived as abusive behavior towards the children of the mother, and as such, I'll permit it, but with the understanding that when you try to offer other evidence along these lines, there is at some point going to be the court's ruling that it is cumulative. So I suggest that you analyze it along those lines as to whether this is the witness you want to testify about these events.
Now, as to the same witness, there is a further statement dated April 26th. The first page, there is no dispute.
Which witness now?
This is Brian Andersen.
I don't have any other. Oh,
It's dated April 26th.
yeah. Okay.
The first page, there is no dispute. As to the second page, the final objection, there is a dispute.
What objection? Your writing here is on the Xerox copy is almost such that I can't see
The
it.
objection that I made there was vague as a time, and it's irrelevant.
Well, where? Where is it?
It's the last paragraph on page 2.
Okay.
And our office with regard to the Vegas time is that he lives in the home with them for 3 summers. And although he knows the last year's 1977, and he can identify the prior visits by the house they occur in, he can identify which house they were in, so he can know which summer this occurred. And it's not something, the hearing the fighting and all this is not something that just happened once. It's more of a pattern.
All right. So here it's fighting and shouting. All right. The objection will be overruled.
As to page 3, it appears that there are no disputes at page 3, nothing. As to page 4, there are no disputes. As to page 5, there is a dispute. I objected on speculation grounds, and
Where?
it's at the first paragraph, Your Honor, it states, it apparently revolves around the fact that Kitty had lied about going to Jose, and it resulted in Lyle being punished.
I think if you look at that entire paragraph, Your Honor, the incident is another complaint by Lyle where he goes to his cousin, and when they're living in the Muncie house, and Alan remembers on at least one occasion that he came to him and asked him to intervene on his behalf with his father and to protect Lyle. And the incident, as best we can remember, revolves around the fact that Kitty had lied about something, putting the blame on Lyle, and he was getting disciplined for it, and Alan knew that Lyle had not done it. This happened on.
All right. Let's say we'll reserve ruling on that until we have a hearing outside the presence of the jury and describe what it is.
Okay. As to page 6, we have agreements on none of these.
I'll make my authors approve the corporate life. With regard to the first one, where she makes French toast for Lyle, Eric, and Alan, and uses 18 eggs to do it. And this is something that happened a number of occasions. And he gets suggestions where she could use a couple eggs and a little bit of milk, and he wanted milk in it and wouldn't do it. And it's more of the bizarre behavior.
All right. The objection is sustained as to first paragraph on page 6.
With regard to the second paragraph, what I intended to elicit was not specifically these words, but to have him describe who the boys were at the ages that he saw them in terms of their personality characteristic, whether they were shy or aggressive or that type of thing. I don't intend to go into this specific conclusion that he has with regard to Eric's strength or ability to fight back, that type of thing. I'm just going to have him talk generally about their personalities, which I think I referred to earlier, and I'm only going to do it once, not twice.
What's the objection to that?
The objection that I had to this particular paragraph was it was speculation and improper opinion.
Well, I'd have to hear what it is. I suppose an individual can describe in general the outward appearance of another person. I don't know exactly how he'd describe it.
Specifically, as it was stated in this report, he always felt that if Eric decided to fight back, he could take apart his older brother easily.
Well, I assume they're not going to ask that.
I'm not offering that.
We're talking about Eric Menendez when he was at most.
They're not
5 years
asking
old.
that. They're not asking that.
But with respect to the other items that they wish to elicit.
Oh, you wanted to get that in, is that what you're saying?
No.
You don't want it in either. So that no one wants it in, so it won't come in. So what are we talking about?
What I'm talking about is the bracketed portion, which talks about Eric Menendez and his opinion that he acted frail and cried a lot.
The descriptors I intended to use were the fact that he seemed to be highly emotional and that he cried easily. So I'm not going to use a lot of the words that are in that paragraph.
All right, if that's the offer, then it'll be objection is overruled.
The next objection is he describes Lyle as always on the verge of breaking. He said that he held his emotions in check with great effort. He was nervous and sensitive, and Al knew he wasn't happy. And it was my intention to ask him specifics about what he observed about Lyle and his emotions, and he can describe particular instances rather than forming the conclusions.
All right, we'll have to hear the questions and the answers and deal with it at that point. I don't see any reason to resolve it at this stage.
Okay. The next item is the description, Alan's description that it was a pig house, that it was incredibly messy. I didn't intend to go into that area too much because other witnesses have more information in that area. But the incident that he describes where Jose would pull his car in the garage, pull all the junk out of the car and throw it on the floor, and the junk would just stay there and be run over and be compacted, and that Al would sometimes go there looking for cigarette packs, and that he would find 30 to 40 partially complete packages of cigarettes. It's just more of the bizarre behavior kind of evidence.
The court will sustain the objections that are relevant.
Your Honor, as to the last page, there were 3 objections, the bracketed areas, and we have no agreement on any of those.
With regard to the first one, the chores area, we've already dealt with that. But the second paragraph, I do want to use, which was a behavior which Jose exhibited on a number of occasions, which is when he would go in and start to talk to the family and nobody would pay attention to him. He would just take the silverware drawer and dump it on the ground, or he'd take all the Tupperware out of the cupboard and throw it on the ground. And this was done in the presence of the boys, and it's our position that this is part of the terrorizing that took place.
This is the only.
People wish to respond.
I believe that's irrelevant, Your Honor. That's my objection.
All right, it seems to be offered to show the emotional reaction of Jose Menendez at the defendant's early age, so I'll permit it.
With regard to the next paragraph, the part that we intended to offer was the fact that Alan, who was 16 at the last time that he visited the house, saw Jose do the same thing to the boys and would do it to him, where Jose was evidently incredibly strong and would grab you by the upper biceps when he wanted to get your attention and lift you off the ground and talk to you in that way. He also will describe, which isn't detailed in here, the fact that when he spoke to you, he would put his face just inches away so that he had your total attention, and he describes this happening to him in front of the boys, and he describes Jose doing similar things to the boys, grabbing them by the arm, lifting them off the ground, pulling them and direction. So
All right, if it can be connected to activity with the defendants, I'll put it.
The last paragraph, Your Honor, I also object on the basis of relevancy.
It was, I'm not sure that this is one of our most important issues, but it is consistent with the other cousins who were brought to that house to live, is that they were treated as cleaning ladies, gardeners, maintenance men. They were made to feel very insignificant and inadequate, and they were humiliated on a regular basis. And they can testify to the effect of that kind of behavior, of the humiliation and demeaning part of that behavior. Not so much in terms of the chores, but when they tried to do the chores, the fact that they were always doing them wrong. This was done in front of the boys, and they saw the same type of criticism of the boys, that they couldn't vacuum correctly, they couldn't do the laundry correctly, they couldn't clean the garage correctly. And it's a pattern of behavior which makes these people, who are much older, end up feeling extremely inadequate and like there's something very wrong with them. And it's our position that the same experience happened to the boys.
Right, the objection is sustained. Anything else before the witness testifies?
No, Your Honor, not as to this
All
witness.
right, do we have this producer from Courtroom Television here? There have been complaints, what's your name, sir?
Harry Morgan.
There have been complaints that the TV has picked up private conversations of the attorneys during recesses. And there has also been a complaint by one juror that her image was seen on the television by a friend. Do you have any information about these things?
No, sir. I know that there is a person assigned to listen to the proceedings 10 seconds before they're aired. They're instructed to kill all the sounds from the courtroom with any conversation between counsel and client. And they're definitely instructed to do that. I think what happened with the juror is as the jurors were coming in, and the court has usually been keeping the camera off until the jurors are seated. Our camera was going to get a shot of the chart, just testing, believing that you had shut off the camera. Unfortunately, it was there.
Well, as far as the latter situation is concerned, your cameraman has communication with the people in control of the delay box and people who are aware of whether something is being broadcast out of the courtroom or not. And there is no excuse for anything such as that occurring. He is aware, or should be aware, that a picture is being transmitted outside of the courtroom and shouldn't have to rely upon my turning the picture on or off. And if that recurs, then the court will take corrective action so that it doesn't happen again. And the corrective action is dependent upon what happens in the future, and you're aware of what sort of corrective action the court can take. And also in regards to conversations, whether someone is assigned to do something and instructed to do something is not good enough, that person is to succeed in not permitting any private conversations or confidential communications between counsel or counsel and their clients from being broadcast outside of the courtroom. And if that cannot be accomplished, again, the court will take effective corrective action. The court is aware that certain commentators on Courtroom Television Network found it humorous that the court would be concerned enough about the matter to turn off the sound during recesses and times when we were having conferences at the bench. It seems now that the court's concerns were very appropriate in that regard because of the failure of Courtroom Television Network to successfully monitor the broadcast to effectively delay and prevent transmission of any such conversations. So if this occurs again, the court will deal with it rather strictly. Is that understood?
Yes, sir.
All right, and if there is some problem with the personnel being involved with the monitoring of the delay box, then someone else should be assigned to it so that this delay box has some meaning rather than just some piece of equipment that someone has purchased or rented and begrudgingly has installed, but is actually being used for the purpose for which it was ordered.
Yes, sir, it is not begrudging. We don't want it to happen.
All right, then. All right, thank you. And then we'll proceed with the trial. Both sides ready with the jury?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, let's get the jury out, please. In the trial, the juries are both present, and we'll resume with the testimony. The defense may call its next witness.
Thank you. The defense calls Alan Anderson.
All right, is he here? All right, step forward, please, and stand behind the court reporter. Face the court clerk over here. Raise your right hand.
solemnly swear that the testimony you may give in the cause now pending before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Please stand. Would you tell me your full name and spell your last name?
Brian A. Andersen Jr., Andersen.
Mr. Anderson, are you related to Lyle and Eric Menendez?
Yes, ma'am, I'm your first cousin.
And can you look at our family tree up there and see if you can find yourself?
Brian and Pat, Alan and Tim.
So that's in the Charles and
Yes, Charles and May Anderson, yes.
And Brian is your father
Brian is my father, which is Kitty's brother,
and Pat is your mother.
yes.
So Kitty and Jose Menendez were your aunts and uncles, is that correct?
Correct.
How old are you?
31,
Is it accurate to say that you are 6 years older than Lyle and 9 years older than Eric?
I believe it's 6 and 8 years.
And did you have the occasion to be around the Menendez family over a period of time as Lyle and Eric were growing up?
Yes, I did.
And what is your earliest memory with regard to where you saw them? And if you want to identify them by the houses.
Well, the earliest that I remember is if we have a picture of the Hinsdale home.
Your Honor, may I mark as 148, a chart of the Menendez family homes starting with Wexford Terrace, and is 149, a chart of the Menendez family homes starting with Pennington, New Jersey.
Yes.
Mr. Anderson, is it easier for you to refer to timeframes by the houses they were in rather than by specific dates?
Yes, it is.
And when you remember them being in the Hinsdale house, would that have been approximately 1970 to 1972?
That was just after Eric was born.
And the family was together, I take it? Kitty and Jose and Lyle were all living in that house?
Yes.
Would you go over and visit there occasionally?
Yes, we would. We would just go over there as a family unit, my father, mother, brother, myself. And we would socialize with Kitty and Jose and the boys, or the adults would socialize and the boys would play. The boys and myself, my brother.
Okay. And while you were visiting during that period of time, I take it that Eric would have been less than 2 years old, is that correct?
Correct.
And showing you a picture, which I would now like to mark as 150. And Your Honor, I have enlargements, and on the back I have an envelope with the original photograph. They are attached, so may I use one number, or did you want sub-numbers?
They're all of the same.
Yes,
Thing.
the original small photograph is here, and the enlargement is on the front.
With the idea that the small would be the duplicate for the purpose of the juries.
Duplicate, or it's just partly for authenticity, so they can see what the original photograph looks like.
Well, I don't see any need for it for that purpose at all, if that's the only purpose.
We can use a small one for the duplicate.
All right, then both will be marked as Exhibit 150.
Mr. Anderson, showing you a photograph which we've now marked as 150. I ask if you recognize that,
That's the Hinsdale home.
okay? And would the Hinsdale home be the one shown in the photograph?
Oh, no, they had a circle sidewalk, as you see there, that I'm walking up into their home.
So the Hinsdale home would be on, do
That's someone sitting on the front porch taking that picture,
you recognize the person in the front yard?
if I may. That looks like Lyle.
And do you know who lived in the house that is pictured?
The house that is pictured.
Were Terry and Carl?
Terry and Carlos's home, I believe, is this one back over in here. Like there was across with the field divided the subdivision. There was a center plot of land, and it was just beginning to be under development. It was mostly all prairie at the time. And then there was the street. The street came in and then horseshoed around, so that it left a big open field in the center.
Okay. Now, during the time that they were living in the Hinsdale home, did anything unusual occur with regard to Eric leaving the home and going to his aunt's house?
Yes, it was quite unusual to myself because as the adults were preoccupied with themselves, both boys would be able to, and my brother and I made it up as they would be able to escape out of the home, and Eric would then cross the street, get in the field, and then my brother and I would realize where they were, and I would go over and have to run on the field and chase Eric and bring him back to the home. Because his purpose of doing was to go over to the girls, his cousins of Terry and Carlos.
To your knowledge, did this happen on a fairly frequent
Oh,
basis?
fairly, very frequently. It was almost a joke at how easily he could get out of the home.
Okay, and he was less than 2 at the time, is that correct?
He was walking, yes.
Now, when you would return him to the home, did his parents seem to be concerned about the fact that he was out?
They would
crossing the
laugh.
street?
Okay, wait until she finishes the question before you answer. Can't get them both down at the same time, okay?
I'm sorry.
Okay. What was the reaction of Kitty and Jose Menendez with regard to their son crossing the street and going over into that field?
They would be jovial. More of a joke.
After the Menendez family left the Hinsdale home, did you see them again?
Not for some time.
Did you eventually go and spend several summers with them?
Yes, I did.
And do you know the dates of the summers you spent with them?
The dates, no, but I know the homes. I know the 3 different homes that I stayed in with them.
Okay. Can you find the homes on the chart? Assuming we have them all.
The Cedar Grove home that had a long driveway in it. I remember that home. I remember the Hinsdale home. I remember the Muncie home. And I also remember the Princeton Junction home. Princeton Junction home, well, yeah, those are the 4 homes I remember.
And the Princeton Junction home they lived in from 1977 to 1978. Do you know if you were there in 77 or 78?
I was there in 77.
And was that your last visit?
Yes,
And in 1977, you would have been 16 years old,
correct.
and Lyle would have been about 9, and
9.
Eric would have been about 6.
Yes.
During the period of time that you were around Eric and Lyle Menendez, were you able to make certain observations in terms of their personality, what type of people they were?
In which regards, the 77 home, to which area of a home are we talking about?
Did it change over time?
Yes,
Let's do the early, well, you said you remember Cedar Grove, that would have been before Eric was born.
right.
And Hinsdale, he was very small. So let's start with Muncie. Did you spend summers with him in the Muncie house?
Yes, ma'am, I did. I spent two separate summers in the Muncie home.
And during that period of time, can you describe for me just generally the personalities of the 2 boys?
The first,
Objection, biggest of time, can you specify?
Yes.
We're talking about the 2 summers in Muncie. Do you know specifically the years? Did one of the summers you spend partly in Muncie and partly in Princeton Junction?
Well, Muncie would be 75 and 73, I believe. Yes, 73. And you got to excuse me, Your Honor. I'm dates are not very well with me. 75 was for sure because I was in 8th grade at the time. And then I went after 75, 77. 75, 77, because I helped them move to the Princeton Junction home.
Okay, so we know for sure 1975, we know for sure 1977, and you're saying possibly 1973?
No,
Or-
70, no, I had to get my bearings straight as far as where I
Okay.
was in school.
Okay. If we're looking at the period 1975 to 1977, were the boys pretty much the same during that period of time, or did they change?
With Lyle, things were somewhat the same. With Eric, though, I noticed a drastic difference.
Okay. And can you describe Lyle for me, since he was the same both times?
Lyle was like myself. I was a quite rebellious child. I just was inquisitive. I like to go investigate. I like to do things. Lyle at that time was not allowed to leave the yard. And I found that kind of strange that the neighborhood was off a busy street. The neighbors were all kind, especially the one friend that I befriended while there.
Okay.
Okay, wait for another question.
And with regard to Eric, now, did you see a change between 1975 and 1977?
He became much quieter, became more introverted.
During the times you lived in these various homes, and I'm going to direct your attention particularly to the Muncie, Princeton Junction times, which would be 75 and 77.
Mhm.
Did you see or hear fights between Kitty and Jose?
I heard, I never saw.
Okay. Now, was this just once in a while? Or was
No, oh no, this was frequent. Most of the time it would be late at night or after we've gone to bed where they would have woken me because of where my bedroom was and their bedroom was. Although the doors were closed, for the level of their voice, I could hear them. It would probably wake me up.
Okay, when you talk about the level of the voice,
Jose's voice was a lot louder than Kitty's. Kitty's would be in a defensive type tone to Jose's being more direct.
could you hear words or just loud noises?
Kitty was, in some cases, I did hear, yes, conversations. Kitty was concerned as to.
Well, wait, let's not do that.
Sorry.
You could hear words. Could you
Yeah.
hear other things? Could you hear crying or throwing things or hitting people?
At times, I did hear Kitty crying.
And did you ever see bruises on her?
Yes, I did.
And are there any occasions which you can remember in which you could identify those bruises as having happened during one of those fights?
Yes, I can, because the one morning after I heard that they woke me up, Kitty had a bruise on her bicep and also had a bruise up the upper collarbone at the base of her neck.
Did she have it when you went to bed that
No.
night? Were there some unusual rules with regard to the food that you were served at dinner?
Well, in which detail would you like me to go into with that?
Well, what happened if you didn't finish the food on your plate?
You got it for breakfast or lunch the next day?
And did that happen to Eric and Lyle as well?
Yes, it did.
Would you describe for me, and again, we're focusing on the 75, 77 period, if it's the same for both. Would you describe for me what the atmosphere was at the dinner table?
It was very much of like a Jeopardy setting in regards to Jose drilling the kids with questions of the day and only of that day.
What do you mean questions of the day?
Well, it would be to where newspaper articles, such as certain encyclopedias, different events that happened throughout the day, and an answer was needed quickly. You had to have an answer. You had to have an answer.
Now
And I found that kind of strange because
Jefferson, Is there-
All right, you have answered the
Now,
question.
the last visit that you had there, Lyle was 9 and Eric was 6, is that
Correct.
correct? And were both of them expected to participate in this Jeopardy type of questioning?
More so Lyle than Eric.
And what would happen if you didn't know the answer?
The paper was on the dining on the coffee table, or encyclopedia was on the shelf, and you were instructed to please put your fork and knife down and go find the answer, or bring the paper to the table to receive where the answer was.
And did you participate sometimes in the
I
questioning?
tried to the best of my ability. I was not an avid reader, and I was unable to comprehend where this was coming from when I first started being subjected to this.
And if you didn't know the answer, was that okay?
No.
What happened if you didn't?
I was belittled. I was belittled by Jose.
And were the boys similarly belittled if they didn't? know?
Lyle more than Eric.
When they had to put their knife and fork down and go look it up, would Jose make any comment about the time that it took for them to find the answers?
That was extremely very strange to myself. May I go into detail on that?
Or just tell me about what you saw happen.
If they took more than what Jose knew it took for them to walk to the area, it was money to him. He made it seem like it was money lost to him.
Now, how did he make it seem like it was?
Objection, Your Honor. I move to strike speculation.
No, it was considered.
Okay, you have to wait and just wait.
Mr. Anderson?
There's an objection there, and
I'm sorry.
they're actually not talking to you when they do that. They're talking to me.
I'm sorry, Your Honor.
And also, again, if you could just have a pause after the question is asked so that, number one, it gives the lawyer a chance to object if they want to object. And it also gives the reporter a break so that the reporter can distinguish between the question and the answer, because she's taking down every word.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
All right, the objection is sustained. The answer is stricken.
Did you hear him make comments with regard to the importance of the time that was wasted in looking these things up?
He would directly look at the boys or myself and say, "You've lost $5 from me right now."
Where did the money figure come from? Did he
It was
explain?
because of the fact that he was trying to groom the boys of the corporate level, and money was time. Time was money.
And is that what he explained to the boys?
Yes.
Now, in addition to, was dinner a fun time in the house?
No, it was very tense. I did not enjoy digesting my food at the dinner table.
Were there,
Excuse me. I didn't.
I did not enjoy digesting my food at the dinner table.
were there other times when you observed Jose having conversations individually with one or the other of the brothers?
They would have a one-on-one session.
Okay, now what do you mean by, first, they? Who would have a one-on-one session?
It would be Jose with independently each one of the boys.
And can you describe to me what these one-on-one sessions were like?
Well, like after dinner, if answers weren't given properly, they would sit in chairs across from each other, and Jose would be leaning forward, staring correctly at the boys, and to receive their attention, it would be a look like this close.
Indicating approximately 4 inches, Your Honor?
4 or 5 inches.
Yes.
I mean, it would keep them from being able to wander and look at other things, but Jose talking with them. And I used to back away, and as I backed away, they used to come forward, and the boys would try to sit back in the chairs, and Jose would make them sit so they could confront and talk about what the wrong answers were.
So they would sit leaning forward in these
Yes.
chairs. You said the chairs were facing each other. How close were the chairs?
Their knees were 2 inches apart.
Now, is this something that was unusual or something that happened on a regular basis?
This happened only when there was a frequent misanswering of constant questions.
And would there be other times in which you would see one-on-one conversations between Jose and one of the brothers?
Only during discipline, or if they were going to go play tennis, what he expected of them during that practice.
Okay. And would that take place in the same type of physical setting that you've described?
Yes.
And how long would these talks last?
Anywhere from 5 minutes, as I've seen a few asked a half hour. Those are half hour long, half hour, sorry.
And how did the boys look during these sessions?
Extremely tense, unwilling to want to be where they're at.
Were you,
Objection, I would strike that answer, not speculation.
Right, the first portion of the answer, extremely tense, would remain, and the balance of the answer is stricken as a conclusion.
thank you. Were you disciplined by Kitty and Jose during the time that you lived there?
Yes, I was.
And what type of discipline did you receive?
Verbal.
And what do you mean by that?
Either one of the two, Jose or Kitty, would raise their voice to a level of where I would be like, yes, 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 I won't do that, I won't do that. And then I would be sent to my room and the door would be locked
Now, how long would you be left in your room?
for hours at a time. And at times I'd been left in there overnight.
Were you allowed to come out?
When I had to go to the bathroom, I would knock at the door and I would start off with a soft knock and I got no response. So my knocks would get harder and no one would respond. And
So what
as
did
a little boy, as a 12-year-old kid, I looked at the garbage can, I looked at the window, and there were times I opened the window and I peed out the window.
Were the boys sent to their room for punishment
Yes,
also?
ma'am.
And were they similarly not allowed to come out?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you ever physically disciplined by either Kitty or Jose?
Never Kitty. Jose, if I would not accept Jose's face-to-face talks, and I would back up from him. And he would grab me by the arm, which he had immense hands. And once she grabbed you, you did not try to pull away because his strength was unbelievable. And he would just grab you and it would just keep squeezing. As the more you pulled away, the tighter his grip got. And you could tell him you were getting hurt because you were not listening to him. He didn't care. So then you learned if he grabbed you because you backed away from him, that you just stand still and then he would not get in your face, but he would accept the fact that he was within arm reach of me.
Would you have bruises afterwards?
Yes, I would have his immense handprint on my upper bicep.
And how often did that happen to you?
Only when he got into my face.
How often was that? Are we talking about once or twice or 10 times, or do you have a range?
I'd say between 6 and 10 times.
And did you ever see him grab the boys similarly?
When they did not want, yes, I did.
And when would that be?
When they did not want to go to their room, he would take them and would grab them by the biceps and would forcibly take them down the hall to put them in their room.
And what would their reaction be?
Oh, that they did not want. Their feet would be lifted off the floor. They did not want to be doing this because they wanted to spend time with me watching TV.
Were you ever disciplined with a belt?
I was threatened, but never. I personally was never touched, but Jose.
Objection, he's answered the question.
Okay.
Objection sustained.
Were the boys ever disciplined with a belt?
Yes.
And can you tell me how you know that?
Because at that time, we were disciplined at sometimes together or separate instances. And I was either told in separate instances to stay in the front room to watch the TV. Kitty at that time would turn the TV up. Or at times when I was in the same room, where our rooms were side by side, you could hear you can hear the belt, as I also received when I was a child.
And would you see bruises on the
Yes.
boys after that?
Yes, and they're above their thigh area for where a belt would be hit.
Would be the upper thigh area?
Upper thigh, lower buttocks area.
Is this something that happened once or more than once?
I would have to say 12 to 15 times.
And would you hear anything from them, or did the TV block?
I would
it out?
hear cries, and then I would hear Jose's voice level raise, and then I would hear silence.
What kind of sounds?
Silence the boys, just stop, right?
Were the boys sent to their room as punishment also sometimes?
Yes, and also their doors were locked.
Now,
her door. They only both shared the same room.
When they were sent to their room, what was it, you go to your room for 10 minutes, or is it a set
Oh,
period
no.
of time?
Oh, no. There was never a short-term discipline as far as being locked in your room. There was always long-term, 1 hour minimum, day maximum.
And did you have occasion to help them clean their room one time?
Oh, yes. I'm a very meticulous person, so I would take it upon myself to try to educate that with them.
Did they share a room?
Yes, they did.
And was there a time when in cleaning the room you found something unusual?
I found a Tupperware container under the bed,
And what was in the Tupperware container?
feces remnants.
When let me go back to the belt. There was one other question on that. Would Jose do anything with his belt other than hitting people, which was intimidating?
Well, yes. When he came home, he would sit in his chair and have his paper, and Kitty would then come in and fill him with the day's events, or prior to that would have called him on the phone to prepare him for when he got home. He would just take his belt off and lay it on the couch, or at times he would, when you take a belt and you snap it to get your attention, and would lay it on the coffee table.
And did that have any particular significance or meaning to you?
Someone was going to be disciplined.
Would you know why?
At that point, no, because I would then try to filter back into the day what happened that Kitty may have gotten upset about.
The discipline that you received or that you saw the boys receive, was it for things that it was obvious you were going to get in trouble for that? Or were
Repeat the
they?
question, please.
Yeah. When you would either get disciplined or see the boys disciplined, would it be for behavior that you knew was going to really make somebody mad?
Well, no, I consider it normal childhood behavior, normal things that we would do.
Do you have children yourself?
Yes, ma'am.
How many?
2 girls.
Would Kitty try to intercede and protect the boys in situations like this?
Not all the time. It all depends on Jose's reaction to the crime, I guess, if you want to say it. It all depended on how he was going to, towards Lyle. He was always more physical with Lyle than he was Eric. And Kitty would always be more for defense of Eric than he would, and she would always leave Lyle out in the wings to accept whatever would happen. And she would always be there for Eric.
And what about Kitty? Did she have a temper?
Oh, immensely. I'm sorry.
And did you have opportunities to observe her get mad?
Oh, yes. She had this.
Wait a second. How often did that happen? Would it be once a day, once a week, once a month, once a year?
Once a week for sure.
Okay. Now, was there anything unusual about her behavior when she got mad?
If I may, I could show you her parents that let me know she was about to fly off the handle. Is that she would.
Can you stand up and demonstrate?
She would be standing in an area, spacing on an area, and thinking about what, and all of a sudden she would just turn her fist up and
So you'd clench
she
it?
would squint. Her lips would go straight. She had perfect teeth, so you can see her teeth would just come out. The veins in her neck would pop, and her fists would be, and then clenched, where her knuckles would be white from clenching her fists. And at first, I didn't know what to accept of that. And then as I lived there, I realized what that was, what that appearance of her was about to happen with, what was about to happen.
What was about to happen?
On numerous occasions, and this happened every week in the Muncie home. She would, in the kitchen, would open a cupboard and start taking coffee cups, coffee saucers, breakfast bowls, these are glass items, and repeatedly throwing them in the sink and breaking glass in the sink. And at the end of that, then I would walk in, because I'd be in the other room around the corner watching TV or in the general area. It would get my attention immediately. I would run in the kitchen and go, "Kitty," which would snap her out of whatever she was into. There were times that also she would not snap out of it. She would just repeatedly keep doing this until either she was satisfied or that role of wherever she was emptied.
And when this happened, how did it make you feel? Was it a frightening
It
experience?
was very
or stunning,
frightening.
or-
Also, it made me very concerned. I just didn't know what to make of it. I tried to ask her what was the problem. She would not talk to me. She would just right away direct my attention to getting the broom and the dustpan and the vacuum cleaner, so the mess was cleaned up before Jose got home.
And what was the reaction of the boys to this behavior?
Normal.
What do
This
you
seemed
know?
very normal, which they didn't get extremely excited. They were like I did, which I found to be very strange in my own way.
And would there be times when she would get angry rather than throwing the dishes, when she would get angry and express her anger directly to you or to either of the boys?
She would do that fist clenching, face tensioning thing, which whenever that would happen, I would jokingly look at Lyle and say, "Oh man, here we go. Something's going to happen now." Or what did you do? Or what, I'm trying to think, what did I do? And then she would just fill us verbally with what her problem was with us as far as raising her voice and yelling at us.
And how long would it go on?
Until she had to say what she had to say, which could be anywhere from a minute to sometimes 5-10 minutes.
And was it frightening to watch?
Yes, extremely, because especially towards Eric, being as young as he was.
All right, let's take our break. It's about 6 minutes after the hour, and we'll resume at 1:30, ladies and gentlemen. Don't discuss this case with anyone. Don't form any final opinions about it, and we'll resume at 1:30. So, counsel had a matter or two that you wanted to deal with outside the jury's presence. If you want to have that done now, we can.
I think the court will testimony to specific areas.
Yes.
Mr. Anderson, was there an incident while you were living in Muncie in which Lyle came to you and asked you to protect him from Jose?
Yes.
And was there a particular situation that you remember that had something to do with Kitty lying?
Yes,
Could you describe it for us?
sure. I was in the garage and I was down there smoking a cigarette at a very young age. I started smoking. Lyle then came in through the door from the basement and he looked sad. He was very puzzled. And he was wanting to know why whenever we did anything as cousin to cousin, why the severity of the punishment was always more for them than for me when the crime was the same for all three of us. He was very confused. He wanted to know why. At that age myself, I couldn't give him an answer. I didn't know what made his father tick. I didn't know.
Okay, and did he ask you to do something on his behalf?
He asked me to please talk with his father. I told him at that time that I just couldn't. I said, we'll talk to Kitty.
Was there a situation in which something happened and Kitty lied about it and Lyle got the blame?
Well, we were in the backyard and there was more than one instance that I can
Okay.
remember.
So there were a number of situations where she would lie about something that would have happened and Lyle got punished for something that wasn't his fault?
The things that I did that Lyle had no part of, maybe by standing there or he wasn't even in the area, would be Kitty's telling Jose that he did it.
And then would Lyle get punished for that?
Yes. Oh, yes. And I would have nothing would be said to me at all.
That's it with that particular incident, Your Honor.
All right, did you wish to examine on those?
I have one other incident. I didn't know if you wanted me to do both of them or just,
Oh, I thought you had completed.
well, that there were two areas you wanted officer proof.
Okay,
You
go
want me
ahead
to
with
do
the
both?
other. Go ahead with the other and then.
With regard to a description of Lyle's emotional condition, you had told me before that he was on the verge of breaking and talked about whether he had control over his emotions or what type of control he exerted. Do you remember that?
Lyle did the best he could to not,
Objection, this is speculation.
Well, it's not responsive. She just asked, do you remember something of that nature? You
What
can
do
say
you
yes
re-
or no.
I'm sorry, yes.
Okay, what do you remember observing in that area with regard to that type of behavior?
When Lyle would talk to me in a cousin to cousin conversation, in his conversation, in his tone of voice, he would start out very calm and direct as to what he wanted to say. But as the conversation grew on, he would start weakening to the point of where he would start stuttering at times, wanting to cry. And when he would hold his eyes would water, but they would not, the tears would not go down his cheek. It would just wipe away. But then again, he would then gather his composure and continue then with the questioning as far as wanting me to help him, as far as talking with his father, that I, at that point, flat out refused.
And this idea that he was holding his emotions in check, was it just this one incident or?
Oh, no, not at all. No, on separate occasions that when the discipline should have been equal amongst all three or just him and myself, it got more towards the boys, and I was sent to my room, door locked. And then you could hear the boys being punished in their room with either severity of me hearing them with the belt or his father yelling at them. And then you would hear that door slam. And then you know that Jose was done once the door was slammed.
Were
Okay,
there,
again, that has nothing to do with the question she was asking about referring to Lyle Menendez and his dealing with emotions or holding his emotions in. That's what she was asking.
were there a number of incidents that you observed, without going into the incident?
Whenever we talked, yes, whenever we talked.
On any one subject or others?
No, only about the way that there was no equality in the way we were disciplined.
How many times did you have such a conversation?
That I know of 4.
And each time his demeanor was the same?
Yes, he would start out very calm, direct, and then it would grow into him holding his back, his emotions.
Were there rules in that family about whether you were allowed to cry or not?
Emotion was something you did not show. It showed a sign of weakness. Jose made that very adamant, even to myself, because I am, and I'm an emotional guy. I don't know how big I am. I do have emotion. I'm not afraid to show that emotion. I had to go out in the backyard at times and just show my emotion to myself so that the kitty and Jose would not see this emotion.
Right, the question had to do with crying and whether there was any house rule regarding crying.
Yes, there was. Emotion was something you did not show.
Okay.
What about
Was it
crying?
specifically in reference to crying?
If you had to cry, you went to your room. You did not cry in front of Jose.
How was that spelled out?
You want to,
Someone say something about it?
Jose says he says, if you cannot handle the conversation, you will go to your room until you're able to come back and deal with the situation.
All right, is that it?
That's it, Your Honor.
Okay, the people wish to inquire on those?
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Anderson, regarding the time that you said that the crime didn't, or you were punished unequally, you as opposed to defendants, what happened? What did you do, or what did you and the brothers do on that occasion?
And there was all kinds of occasions as far as mischievous kids.
What happened the time that you're referring to?
Well, the time that I went in the garage and just would take things down off the shelves that should not have been taken down and relocated when I did not put them back in the right area. When Jose went to find them, or Kitty went to find them, they were not there. They were in an area where they should not have been, which means the boys should not have been in that area to touch those things, which I am the one that touched them.
Did you, with respect to the time that you referred to, that Kitty told Jose that Lyle was involved, did Kitty see you do what you called this crime?
No,
Was she told somehow that Lyle was involved in that?
she assumed. That's the only thing I can suggest.
Okay, and you said that in response to counsel's question that she lied.
She did lie because I know specifically one instant.
Is that what you were referring to? The time that you were smoking in the garage?
Not just that one occasion.
Well, with respect to what you testified to.
Correct.
You said that Kitty lied about something that led to Lyle Menendez being punished.
Okay.
What are you talking about?
When we cut the flowers off, I cut the flowers off.
You cut flowers off.
Yes.
And then, can you describe what happened there?
It was more of a temperamental thing towards Jose because of the fact that when him and I the night before had a stern discussion about how I was, my attitude and everything.
What was your attitude like?
Rebellious to his type of discipline and the way he would lock me in my room.
And why would you lock you in your room?
Okay, now we're getting off the subject. You asked him to describe something about flowers. What did you do, cut some flowers?
Yes, I cut the heads off all the flowers.
And there was some reaction to that?
Oh, yes, it was a very negative reaction to that. As far as on Kitty's part, in the beginning when she spotted out what happened.
Mr. Kuriyama.
Yes.
We have all our jurors here?
Do you remember giving a report, having an interview with the defense on April 26, 1992? Do you remember that?
You have to repeat the question, please.
Do you remember having an interview with defense attorney Jill Lansing and defense attorney Leslie Abramson on April 26, 1992 at Oak Lawn, Illinois?
In 92, yes, I do.
Okay, and do you remember telling those attorneys that one of the incidents that you recalled happening at the Menendez house was you described where they went out, you and the two brothers went out and cut all the flowers off all the plants?
They did not participate in that with me. They were there with me, but they did not participate in that.
Okay, and when you said that, what you meant that they were
They were there,
participating?
but they did not do the actual physical damage to the flowers.
Do you recall telling those counsels that you and the boys would do lots of things which could be considered malicious, and you take some of the responsibility for their activities, and you gave that example of you, the three of you going out and cutting all these flowers off the plants as one of those things that you and the brothers did?
I said no, they did not. They were there, but they were physically did not do the flower cutting.
All right, Mr. Kuriyama, we're getting far afield. The only purpose of this hearing was to see if there was some foundation for the witness testifying about these events, and there seems to be. So at this point, there is sufficient for the witness to testify.
Very well done.
All right, let's get our jurors in, please. Jury panel for each defendant is now in court, and we'll resume with the examination of the witness. Ms. Lansing?
Thank you. Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
When we broke for lunch, you were talking about situations in which Kitty would get mad, and you demonstrated for us this balling up your fists and the veins on the neck standing out and the gritting the teeth and the squinting the eyes. Is that correct?
Correct.
And would that only happen if it was in response, if something was going on, or would it sometimes happen when nothing was going on and no one was around?
Yes, there were instances where, in myself coming in from outside to get a drink of water, walking through the hall in the house, she'd be sitting at the kitchen table or standing at the kitchen table, looking outside or affixed to something on the wall. And at the table, sitting down is when she most frequently would do that. She would be sitting thinking of something. I don't know what it was, but then she would always just get into that routine of hers that she was thinking of something. And there were instances where that happened where nothing negative happened to either one of us three.
It was just in response to something she was thinking
Just
about?
thinking of, yes.
And would there be instances in which she would seem to be thinking about something so intently she wouldn't hear anybody, she wouldn't see anybody?
I tried talking.
Overruled. You can answer the question.
I at times did see her in those like mesmerized states where she was just affixed. I tried talking where I had to talk 2 or 3 times just to get her attention. There were times where I would make noise, but she would not move. Even when I was in the kitchen getting a glass of water, whatnot. It wouldn't disturb her.
You told us about this incident in which the dishes were thrown in, or multiple times the dishes were thrown in the sink.
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Did the boys seem to think this was something unusual or react like something very different was going on?
It surprised me. No, it didn't seem like it was, I don't know, like it was something normal to them, I guess. I mean, they just didn't react like I did. They didn't, I got up, I went into the room, I tried to deal with the situation, and it was not that with them, no.
And just to backtrack a little bit, when you talked about the Tupperware container that you found under the bed, you said that you looked inside and there were feces inside. Did they appear to be human?
I am not I'm,
Did they have a ferret?
Objection overruled.
I know of the fact they had a ferret, but while I was there, the ferret was not there.
Okay, so this is not ferret feces that you're
No.
looking at?
No, I'm not an expert on feces, but no, it was not animal feces, no.
Okay, thank you. Was there a time in which Lyle came to you and asked you to talk to his father for him with regard to discipline?
Correct, yes,
And can you tell me about that? Was it more than once?
yes.
How often did this happen?
I know of 4 instances that he came to talk with me.
Okay. And what would he say?
Well, he was concerned as to, and also very confused as to why we were all disciplined, where I was sent to my room, I was yelled at and sent to my room, door locked, and how come they got hit? He didn't understand why I never got hit.
And did he ask you to do something for him?
He asked me to please talk to his father, for which I refused.
Why?
Just in Jose's demeanor, you went through Kitty, and then Kitty would talk to Jose.
Did you talk to Kitty on his behalf?
Yes, I did go to talk to Kitty to ask not to tell her that Lyle came to me, but just to talk with her as to why are things so different between myself and the 2 boys.
And they were substantially younger than you, I think.
Oh, yes.
And after you went to Kitty with these complaints of Lyle's, did things change?
No.
Do you know if she ever talked to Jose about it?
No.
When Lyle would be talking to you about these situations, would he be laughing? Would he be serious? What was his
Oh,
demeanor?
no. He'd come in with a very straight face, which led me to believe that he wanted to talk about something.
Okay.
He started out calm.
Objection, no question pending.
Sustained. Next question, please.
Okay, started out calm. Did anything change in that?
His mood, I mean, he became somber as the questions came on, which then brought a waterness to his eyes.
And would he actually cry?
No, he would not break down. No, he would not fall. No.
Were there rules in this family about whether you could cry or not?
Yes, you did not. You did not show emotion. You had to be a very strong man because a corporate man does not show emotion.
And the last time, I think you said you were visiting the boys were 6 and 9.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
And if you started to show emotion, what happened to you?
you were sent to your room.
And
You were
was,
taken out of the sight of Jose because Jose did not want to see that.
was anything said?
Go to your room. And when you're able to come back and deal with the conversation, then you come back.
Did the boys have a choice as to whether they played particular sports, whether they went to practice or not?
Oh, tennis, that was it. It was tennis. Tennis.
And what if they didn't want to play
You made up the time
the next day?
the next day or that evening.
And would you go with the boys and the family when they went to play tennis?
And yes, at most occasions, yes.
And would they go regularly?
Yes.
When would they go?
When Jose got home from work, during the day with Kitty, on weekends, every weekend.
Directing your attention to the weekends, would they go to a public park or where did they play?
Yes, it was a public park area, it was just a nice tennis court area, yes.
Okay, and what would be the schedule with regard to their playing?
It would be 2 hours on, a half hour, 45 minutes off, then back to 2 hours on, then a half hour to 45 minutes off, then back to 2 hours on.
So they would play 6 hours of tennis,
They play a whole day.
and they would do it both days of the weekend?
Yes.
And somewhere along the line, was there a family picnic for lunch or something like that?
Not that I can recall.
Was food brought along?
Water. iced tea,
Did they eat
pops.
during the day?
No, not that I remember, because I remember being hungry. And then they said that when things got done here, we believe we go home and eat.
Did you, when the boys started playing, could they play with one hand, hold a racket with one hand?
When they were younger, Jose, I remember Jose bought Lyle a longer handled racket so he could use two hands.
Because he wasn't strong enough?
Because correct, he wasn't strong enough.
And do you remember an incident in which Lyle got upset and threw his racket?
Oh, yes.
That
Yes,
happened often?
Yes, yeah, for a while, yeah.
And what would cause him to do that?
Frustration because of
Objection,
the,
calls for speculation.
Objection sustained. The answer is stricken.
Did you see a particular incident in which his father ends up putting the racket back in his hand?
after Lyle would throw a racket or have a tantrum because either he was missing serves repeatedly, he was not playing right because his father was not, as his father was playing, he'd be, as he was running around the court chasing the ball, Lyle was returning, he'd be telling Lyle how to stand, how to go approach the ball, how to hit the ball. And it got to be too much to where he would just stop and would just throw the racket down and did not want to play.
And
He would then go across the net.
when you say he,
Jose would go across the net and pick up the racket and put it back in his hand.
how old was Lyle around when you saw these types of incidents?
Well, it was at the Muncie house. He was, he'd be 6, 7, like that.
Well, he was 9 the last time you were there.
77, he was 9, so
So it was the earlier
yes.
visit? And after he put the racket back in Lyle's hand, what would happen then?
Lyle was told to stand there, and Jose would go back across the net and resume as if nothing happened.
And did he serve the ball easily to him?
No. That I found very, very strange that his father,
Objection, no question pending.
Objection sustained. The answer is stricken.
How would he serve to Lyle?
very fast, as if he was serving to an adult.
When this type of training would be going on, would Kitty ever interfere and say they've had enough, they're just little?
No, Kitty was working with Eric.
Was she doing the same thing?
No, not at a stringent level as Jose did with Lyle.
But Eric was also 3 years younger.
Correct.
Did you see an incident in which, as a result of the playing, Lyle had a shoulder injury?
Yes.
And can you tell me about that?
For the way his father served a ball,
Objection, this is non-responsive. Your Honor.
I think this is foundational, Your Honor.
Are you describing a shoulder injury?
correct, sir.
All right, the objection overruled.
For the way his father served the ball, if you're familiar with tennis, there's a lot of force on the upper shoulder area for return. And repeatedly serving the ball, such as his father would do, having the bucket of balls there, Lyle's shoulder started to swell to the point where it was noticeable.
Did Lyle complain about it?
Oh, yes.
Did he ask to keep
He didn't want to,
playing?
he didn't want to know. Jose then stepped aside, and Kitty, because having a softer serve, continued to serve.
And I think when we were talking about the incident in which he put the tennis racket back in Lyle's hand, you said he came over the net. Did he talk to him at all, or did he just put the racket in his hand, or what?
No, he would take the racket, he would grab Lyle's hand, and he would put the racket in his hand. I mean, he would put the racket in his hand to where you heard Lyle accepting the racket.
And when he would talk to Lyle and Eric when they were at these young ages, would he stand up? Would they sit down? What would be the physical posture, say on the tennis court?
On the physical posture, it would be like this, and in that particular area, he'd be bent over, hunched over with his hands on his knees, because he's looking down,
How far away would he be from their face?
just like if he was at the house,
Approximately 4 inches?
4
4
or 5 inches, just so, because that's just the way Jose was.
If Jose wanted to get your attention and nobody was paying attention to him, was there a certain form of behavior he would engage in?
Yes, he would create a ruck, yes.
And what would he do?
He would make a noise such as opening a Tupperware container and throwing a Tupperware on the floor,
I'm sorry, opening,
the Tupperware cabinet, and
okay.
throwing it on the floor.
One Tupperware container?
Oh, no. He'd empty the whole shelf up.
Okay.
Or he would take the silverware drawer out and it would fall on the floor.
Would it fall or?
No, he would be
Dump-
pulled out and then it would let go and it would go to the floor.
And would he,
And then now that I've got your attention, and then
That's
he would
what-
say his piece.
did he have your attention?
Oh, of course.
And did he subsequently clean up these messes that he made? You described this sort of spacing out behavior and were there ever any times when there was a connection between that and Kitty taking something?
Well, I assumed,
Objection calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Did you come upon a cabinet that you weren't supposed to go into?
correct, yes.
And what did you see in that cabinet?
Prescription drugs,
And would you ever see her take them?
yes.
And would her behavior change afterwards?
She would become more, I don't know, I guess how a person, if they were to do a lewd,
Objection, this is speculation.
What would her behavior be?
Objection sustained. The answer is stricken.
What would you see?
she becomes spaced out.
Were you given the responsibility of babysitting for the boys?
Yes,
And you'd be home alone with them
yes,
and responsible for them?
yes.
Were you allowed to answer the phone?
No.
Why?
Jose did not trust the way I would take a message if anybody important were to call. This is his court, this is his office, or any friend or anything.
And were you allowed to make calls?
No,
Was Kitty a good driver?
no.
What kind of a driver was she?
Extremely reckless and non-caring.
And was this with the boys in the car?
Yes.
And are we talking about just the last visit in 77, or are we talking about,
Oh, no, I
Earlier.
can go back to, if you could pull the chart forward. The Cedar Grove house. The Cedar Grove house, they had a Jaguar and an older Thunderbird, like a 66 Thunderbird. And the Jaguar was the car that she was it was crazy.
and was there,
Objection, I call for speculation.
All right, the objection is sustained. The last answer is stricken.
was there an incident in which she took you out to drive in the Jaguar and something unusual happened? You can just say yes or no.
Yes,
And did she say something to you before you went for that ride?
come on, kids, let's go for, yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
What did she say?
She would, well, let's pile in the car and let's go for a joyride.
Now, Cedar Grove, as far as we know, is 69 to 70. So,
We'll just belie myself.
okay. So when you joyride is what she used the term?
Yes.
And what did this joyride consist of?
As we would be driving, she would, I don't know what would be, but she would affix on something where she would be like, would get spaced out. And we would head right for that.
Like,
We would-
right for what, a car?
It could have been anything, could have been a
wall?
tree, and there was certain instances, and where we were going around a windy road, and I don't know what was on her mind, but the road was bending like this, and instead of her keeping format of the road, she just kept on going straight. Until she got off into the loose gravel.
And what would you do during that time?
We would, Kitty.
And was there an incident in which the car spun out?
Yes.
And can you tell me about that?
Was going around a corner. The car did 2 360s
And which car was this?
in the Jaguar.
So that would have been Cedar Grove.
Yes.
And did any of you wear seatbelts?
No.
Lyle would have been less than 2 years old. Was he in any sort of car seat or restraint?
No, he was sitting on my lap.
Was competition encouraged between the boys?
Very much so.
And how would that be done?
In all facets, of course, in the sports, at the dinner table when we were doing like I described earlier, the Jeopardy type dinner that they would have, in question answering, in seeing who can get ready for bed the fastest and be in the bed.
And what would happen to the loser?
Would be ridiculed.
Did Lyle seem to want to please his father in terms of the thoughts that he was expressing?
To answer the question, Lyle, yes, he did want to please his father.
And would there be something unusual that would happen when he would start a sentence? In terms of what happened with the content of it?
Yes.
What would happen?
Jose would get very upset that Lyle was not speaking properly.
Now, was that grammar or a stutter or
No,
what?
grammar.
Did he stutter sometimes?
Only when excited, extremely excited.
And did Eric stutter sometimes? Do you know?
That I can recall, I don't really know. No. Not that I can recall him getting real excited and stuttering to the point where I remember Lyle stuttering.
Now, in this competition that went on between the boys, they were 3 years apart. Did somebody usually win?
Most of the time, Lyle won.
When you were talking about Kitty's driving and seeming to look straight ahead at some embankment or something like that, and she went off the road, did she just brush over the gravel lightly, or what happened?
No, she ended up using the grass and the bush and the cliff area for what the one area was. Not in the Jaguar, it's a different car.
Okay.
And
So Eric was along.
yes, Eric was here at that time. And she ended up using that Mother Nature as a buffer, like in bumper cars, if you were to use it as to get around something. She would just use that to get herself back on the right track.
Did she stop?
No, she would keep on going.
Could you tell when punishment was going to happen? Was it predictable?
Very much so. Yes.
And what things would trigger it?
When Jose walked in the door, his demeanor when he walked in the door.
But I mean, in terms of you getting punished, would it be in response to certain things you do? Did you know?
Overruled.
Did you know what you were doing, why you were getting punished?
I would then have to, well, yes. I would have to filter back in the day what the three of us or myself did, and then have to try to pick out certain instances within that day that I felt were negative and think that was the reason why. We would never ask because an answer was not given unless there was something that was so severe that they needed to talk with us about it.
Were the boys expected to have a high tolerance to pain?
Yes.
And how do you know that?
In sports, you did not back down when hurt. You continued playing.
Was there an incident in which Lyle was hit in the face with a rock?
Yes,
Who threw the rock?
I did.
How was it that you were throwing a rock at him?
It started out innocent, but then developed into a very competitive rock throwing incident to where we were taking shelter behind things and trying to hurt each other, to the point where he went behind the doghouse and I faked a throw. He ducked, came back up to return a throw. Then I repeated with the throw. It hit the doghouse roof, ricocheted off, and then hit him in the face.
And was he injured?
Oh, yes, very much so.
What did he look like?
He looked like he got hit in the face with a board.
Was it,
His whole face where I hit him, it just instantly, it just puffed right up and closed his eye.
was there any bleeding?
There was slight bleeding to where the skin, when it swelled, where it was cracking, and when you get the veins, it was, yes.
And did you take him inside?
Yes.
And was Kitty there?
Oh, yes. She was in the kitchen.
What was her reaction?
She was in awe. She could not believe that I did that to him, that I would even think about hurting him.
And did she do something about treating the eye?
She wanted to slit a little slit to bring the blood out so the swelling would go down.
What was she going to slit it with?
Razor blade.
Did she?
No, I refused to get the razor blade. She asked me to get it, and Lyle was very, very adamant at that time and crying to not allow her to do that. And I would not allow her to do that. I was pleading with her not to do that.
When Jose came home, did he see this injury?
Oh, he was very noticeable, yes.
And what was his reaction?
Oh, he
First
was,
to you.
oh, he was very, very upset. He threatened to send me home. As a matter of fact, he told me I was going home.
Okay. And did he do anything else to her?
I went to my room for the rest of the night with the door locked.
Were you fed?
This, that I remember because of what happened, no, and I don't remember being fed, not eating that night because of everything happening within the late afternoon that this happened.
And what was Jose's reaction to Lyle?
He was upset. Although the boy was injured, he was very adamant on discussing with Lyle why would he even think about throwing rocks in the backyard with someone of my size, and why would he even want to be involved with that kind of just doing that kind of thing? That was not the thing that boys did.
Was it done gently, like he?
No. He was very, very forceful in his conversation.
Was he mad?
Oh yes,
Was he yelling at him?
at the start, yes.
And what was Lyle doing?
Sitting there, accepting what his father was giving him as far as verbal.
And do you remember which house this occurred in?
The Muncie house.
Do you remember anything about Lyle and his stuffed animals?
Yes.
What is that you remember?
He would take his anger out on him.
And how was that?
He'd rip them apart.
Would you see what would happen or what caused it, or how would this happen?
It would just be it would just be it would just happen. It would, he 1 minute be there playing, and the next minute it just something angered him or something, and he would just take his anger out on the doll.
Did he seem to like his stuffed animals?
Yes, very much so.
Did he have a number of them?
For what I remember, yes.
And did he play with them?
When Jose was not home, or yes,
So it wasn't permitted when Jose was home.
correct.
What
Yes.
was wrong with it?
Boys did not play with dolls.
I'd like to have you identify some pictures, if I could mark them down.
Yes.
In addition to spending the summers at the Menendez homes, did you go on vacations with them?
As a family unit, yes.
Family, meaning your family?
My family and their family.
I've shown these pictures to the district attorney already.
All right.
Your Honor, I have 4 photographs now, and I mark them each individually as next in order.
Starting at 151.
I'm directing your attention to a photograph. Do you recognize the people in that photograph?
Yes.
Who's in it?
A young Lyle and my brother
And yourself?
and myself.
And do you know who was taking that picture, if you remember?
No, I could have, well, I could,
If you don't remember,
no, I don't remember.
showing you another one, which I'm going to mark as 152. Does this appear to be the same trip?
Yes. This is petrified forest.
Let me get some clips. showing you what I've marked as 153. Do you recognize this area?
Looks like the backyard of Muncie.
And the boys, do the boys look to be about the same age they were during any of your visits?
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Yes, yes.
And 154, do you recognize this?
Yes.
And what is that?
That is the wooden deck off the back of the house in Muncie and the backyard.
Now, this looks fairly dark and wooded. Was it when you were there?
Oh, yes, very much so.
Was it a dark house?
Yes.
Is there anything, is it the kind of house that made you feel comfortable, or was there something?
No.
While you were visiting the house in Muncie, did you watch Eric being taught how to ride a bicycle?
Yes.
It's 155, Your Honor?
Yes.
And 156, which is a smaller photograph.
Is 156 the same as 155?
No, they're two different photographs. Would you look at what we've now marked as 155 and 156 and tell me if you recognize that area?
That is the street that had the cul-de-sac at the end of their Muncie house.
Okay, and that's 155 and 156.
It was the same picture.
Is this the cul-de-sac?
Yes.
Now, when you were watching Eric ride a bicycle, do you know how old he was? Do you remember which trip it was?
It was the 77 trip.
So he would have been 6 years old?
Yes.
And did you go out and watch him being taught how to ride the bicycle?
Yes.
And would Kitty and Lyle go out also?
Yes.
And where would you sit?
The three of us would stand or sit on the grass in the front yard.
And did it take a number of lessons to teach Eric how to ride a bicycle?
Yes.
How many do you think?
Days.
What was the process by which he was taught to ride a bicycle?
Jose would not allow training wheels be put on the bike because that presented an sissiness within the boys that they were not able to ride a bike without.
Objections to speculation, Your Honor.
That is a fact.
Would he,
Objection sustained, the answer is stricken.
did Jose say anything about the appropriateness of training wheels?
Yes.
And what did he say?
He said the boys would look like sissies.
So Eric would not have training wheels.
Correct.
What would happen? How was he being taught?
Jose would be behind. It would be the street went down an incline towards cul-de-sac. He would put Eric on the bike, run with him for a certain 10, 20 feet, and then let him go.
And what would Eric be doing?
Oh, he'd be in fear.
How would you know?
Oh, he'd be crying, not wanting to do it, and the bike would just be wobbling.
And
He would fall. The end result was that he fell. And then Jose would run back down, pick him up, plop him on the seat, and continue with the exercise of teaching him how to ride the bike.
And would he do this over and
Over
again?
and over and over and over and over again.
And you and Kitty and Lyle were out there the whole time, is that correct?
Yes.
Did you go to him to help him out?
Kitty stopped me.
Did she go to him to help him out?
No.
Did she ever say anything to Jose about this?
No.
When is the last time you saw Kitty?
10 days before her murder.
And can you describe The condition that she was, what did she look like?
like a puppet on a string.
Why do you say that?
She did not have any idea with what she was doing, saying.
Some speculation, Your Honor.
He's describing behavior, Your Honor.
All right, the objection is sustained. The answer is stricken.
What-
That's the question.
What things would you see her do?
We have some foundation as to where and when this event occurred.
I believe you said it was 10 days before their death.
That's
Is
right,
that
where and when.
Correct.
And where was this?
At my house
And where's your house?
in Illinois.
And why were they at your house in Illinois?
My youngest daughter was born, and Kitty was in the area with Eric at Kalamazoo, Michigan,
What
Yeah.
happens at Kalamazoo, Michigan? What was he there for?
tennis tournament.
Okay.
And my father wanted her to come see the child because she was coming that way to see him. And it was he wanted him to come see the child and myself.
And so was Kitty in your home?
Yes.
How long was she there?
The visit was very short. I'd say no more than an hour.
And what did you observe about her behavior during that time?
She had no frame of mind. She was just, you try to talk with her and it would be like she was just seeing right through you. She was not paying attention to you. She was her eyes were bloodshot. She was very pale. She was dressed in a very unusual way that I was used to seeing her dressed.
What was unusual about the way she was dressed? Or was it just that it was different than?
Different from what I was normally used to seeing her in. And
When you spoke to her, did she respond? Did she answer questions? Or?
my dad did most of the talking for her, which I found very strange.
Okay, thank you. I have nothing further.
Any examination on behalf of Eric Menendez? All right, further direct examination.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Anderson, do you know when Eric's birthday is?
No.
Okay. I take it, when you saw Eric and Lyle at the Hinsdale house, that wasn't during the summer that you were living with them.
No.
That's because you lived in Illinois close to Hinsdale, correct?
Correct.
Hinsdale is not very far from.
Let's not lead the witness, please.
Is Hinsdale close to Oak Lawn where
Yes.
Kitty and your father grew up?
Yes.
Okay. So would it be a situation where your family would go over and visit their family?
Yes.
And was it during these family gatherings that Eric would somehow leave the house by himself, go across the street and be in that field that you described?
Yes.
If I might approach Your Honor, here's a photograph here on this side. This photograph that has Lyle on the sidewalk.
Mm-hmm.
Is this the field that Eric would wander into?
Yes.
And at that time, between 1970 and 1972, Eric would be somewhere between an infant and 2 years old.
He was walking. Yes.
Just barely walking?
Yeah, he was walking pretty well.
Okay. If I were to tell you that Eric was born on November 27th, 1970, okay, would that make sense with your memory of how old he might have been?
I am not good with birthdays, even with my own kids. I forget my own kids' birthdays. So
Okay. But if he's born in November of 70, okay, between November of 70 and the end of 72, he's within 2 years.
right.
Okay. Now, you said that when he would wander into this field, it would be you and someone else who would go looking for him?
My brother.
Now, you said some other relatives lived close by,
Yes.
and who was that?
Jose's sister Terry and Carlo. His Jose's sister Terry and her husband Carlos.
And to your knowledge and based on your acquaintance, did Terry and Carlos have daughters, little girls?
Yes.
And did those daughters live with them also in Hinsdale nearby?
Yes.
And was their house across that field?
Yes.
Now, apart from the tennis that you've described, were there other sports that Eric was involved in during the time that you spent with the family in Muncie?
Yes.
And what sports was Eric involved in?
Swimming. It wasn't exactly a competitive swimming type thing. It was
Why don't
just,
you move closer to the microphone?
it was not a competitive swimming thing. It was just something that extra than tennis that they did.
Okay, this was in addition to tennis?
Yes.
And was that true in 1975 as well as in 1977?
In
Both trips?
75, it was swimming. In 77, it was tennis, swimming, and then soccer was at that point.
Okay, so in 1977, in the summer of 77, when Eric would have been about 6.5, he was involved in tennis, swimming, and soccer.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yes. As
And-
far, well, okay, but tennis was the primary.
Okay. And on these weekend outings that you've described, you said that Jose would be working with Lyle for this 6-hour period and that Kitty would be working with Eric.
Mm-hmm.
Kitty played tennis also.
Yes.
Kitty was athletic.
Yes.
And would she be working with Eric for the same 6 hours?
On and off, yes.
And was Eric only allowed water and tea over the course of the day as well?
To the best of my memory, I never saw him eat anything else.
Now, I just wanted to clarify with respect to Eric at 4.5, say in the summer of 1975. You said you noticed a change between what his personality was like at that age and what it was like when he's 6.5 in the summer of 77.
Mm-hmm.
Do you recall
Yes.
that? Would you describe for us what happened, what was different about his personality after 6?
After 6.5?
No, when he's 6.5.
Oh, between the 2 years, I did not.
Mhm.
The first year, he seemed to be more outgoing. He was more willing to want to be with Lyle and myself. And just, he seemed to be a lot more easier going.
Okay.
When I came back in 77, extremely introverted, did not really want to be as much around.
Objection calls for speculation. Motion strike.
All right, the objection is sustained to the last portion of the answer. You may continue with another question.
He was introverted. Was he was quieter?
Yes.
Did he,
Objection leaving also.
All right, objection sustained.
okay. Was he quieter or noisier?
Quieter.
Was he happier or sadder?
Sadder.
Did he participate more with you and Lyle or less?
Less.
Was he friendlier or
Your
unfriendlier?
Honor, I object to this line of questioning. I'm going to just ask what you observed rather than giving this multiple choice question.
All right, it still tends to be leading if you can ask it in a more open-ended way.
Were you struck when you first knew Eric as a baby, even in Hinsdale? What kind of disposition did he have as a baby? If you can remember.
Very careless
Careless?
with himself. I mean, it just like a typical infant is what I took it as.
Well, I mean, how was he with respect to other people?
He liked his aunts and his uncles.
He seemed to like people.
Yes.
He was outgoing and friendly.
Yes.
Did he seem to have a happy or up kind of disposition or a reserved and quiet kind?
Back in Hinsdale, we talking?
Yeah, when he was a baby.
Uppity.
Up?
Yeah.
Okay, you don't mean uppity, you don't mean snobbish, you mean,
No, I mean up in his, he was just happy, yes.
now speeding ahead to the summer of 1977, did he still strike you as a happy child?
No,
Did Jose appear to give as much attention to Eric as he did to Lyle?
no,
In this competitiveness that you've described, this was Jose encouraging the boys to be competitive with each other?
yes.
Did Kitty do the same thing?
Nowhere near as frequently as Jose, but
Did she
yes.
do it at all? Was any allowance made in this competition for the fact that Eric was 3 years younger than Lyle?
No.
With respect to Jose's setting up of competition?
No,
And I think you said that the loser in these competitions would be ridiculed.
yes,
And I think you've also said that most of the time Eric was the loser.
yes.
And how would he be ridiculed?
He would be talked to in such a manner to when you belittle somebody because they've done wrong or did not do up to the satisfaction of that person.
Mm-hmm. So he'd be belittled.
Yes.
Would he be called names?
Swearing names, no.
Any kind of names? Dummy, stupid, slowpoke, jerk, anything.
There was his mother would call him stupid.
And you've talked about episodes where you could hear what sounded like Eric and Lyle being strapped with a belt, correct?
Yes, yes.
And how old was Eric, or strike that, how young was Eric when you first heard that?
When he was with the 77 visit.
And was it during that visit that you saw the bruises that you've described on his upper thigh and buttocks?
Yes,
And this belt that Jose used, do you remember what it looked like?
it was a dress belt, yes,
A dress belt?
yes.
Did it have a metal buckle?
Yes.
I want to talk to you about the bike riding incident that you've described, okay? Concerning Jose pushing Eric on. This was a two-wheeler, correct?
Correct.
And you said over the course of several days, the same activity was being repeated.
Yes.
And at the end of this, was Eric still falling off the bike in the cul-de-sac?
Yes.
And what did Jose do with the bike?
He got frustrated to the point where the bike was physically just thrown in the garage.
Was Eric allowed to play with the bike?
No.
So Jose took the bike and threw it in the garage?
Yes.
And when Eric was being pushed down this hill into the cul-de-sac, was he making any sound?
At points he would scream yes.
At points he would do what?
He would scream.
Scream in fun? Scream in fear?
No, it was scream in fear.
And when you saw him fall off the bike, did you ever see him bleeding?
Yes.
Did you ever observe the scar that Eric has on his left elbow?
As of recent, no.
Did you observe that he got that scar hitting the ground in that cul-de-sac?
He got beat up pretty bad on numerous occasions.
But
And falling.
concerning the bike riding, do you recall a day when he gashed open his elbow in that cul-de-sac?
Yes.
And when he fell off the bike in these repeated efforts, was he ever taken for medical treatment?
No.
And Kitty did nothing and said nothing when this was happening? Was that what you said?
She would stop me from going down to assist.
And she didn't assist
No,
herself?
she did not assist herself.
Now, you said at some point that in some way Kitty would intercede when Jose was being tough on the boys.
Only Eric, yes.
And how would she intercede for Eric?
She would interfere by telling Jose not to be so mean with Eric.
And how would Jose react to her interference?
He would turn and look at Kitty in his way that he would go, Kitty.
So he would get angry at her.
Yes.
And now, was that more true during the period when Eric was in 75, when he was 4.5, than in 77 when he was 6.5?
It was more so in 77.
More in 77?
Yes.
Was Jose tougher on Eric in 77 than in 75?
Yes.
Did you ever say anything to Kitty about why she never interfered while Eric is getting hurt with this bike riding business?
Because Jose was taking care of the matter.
Is that what you said?
Yes.
I have nothing further.
Cross-examination?
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Anderson?
Menendez would take the defendants to the park to play tennis. You indicated that it would be about 6 hours each day. Is
Yes.
that correct? And was that every weekend?
Yes.
And when Mr. Menendez would come home from work, would he spend a lot of time with the defendants?
Yes.
Would he talk about, or would he tutor them at dinner,
Yes.
ask them questions about what was going on in the world?
Yes.
You were saying something about Jeopardy questions.
Yes.
He would do that on a regular basis.
Every dinner, yes.
He wanted his sons to be well informed.
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
Rephrase the question.
Did it appear to you that he wanted his sons to be well informed?
Objection calls for conclusion.
Sustained.
These questioning sessions, were you involved in the questioning sessions?
Yes.
In fact, you indicated that Lyle Menendez could answer questions that you couldn't, correct?
Yes, he could.
And you were, what, about 10 years older?
No,
Or actually, 6 years older,
6 years
and
older.
about almost 10 years older than Eric
8
Menendez?
years older.
And Lyle Menendez would be able to answer questions that you couldn't answer?
Yes, at times.
Would it be fair to say that Mr. Menendez spent a lot of time with his sons?
Yes.
Did he appear to care about how his sons were growing up?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
If you just use those wheels a little bit, move forward.
I'm trying to be relaxed.
The objection is overruled. Another question?
No, sorry, do not. Please repeat the question.
Did it appear that Mr. Menendez was concerned about how his sons were growing up?
In what respect?
Well, he spent a lot of time with them, discussing things with them. He spent a lot of time with their tennis, be fair to say?
He spent a very lot of time with their tennis.
Okay. He spent a lot of time asking them questions about life in general, and about, especially at the dinner table.
The dinner, well, like I say, yes, but the questions that were asked of the boys was a corporate level type questioning. It was nothing of like what you read in the comics or what, on nothing of that matter. Never.
Would it be fair to say that he wanted his sons to be successful in business as he was?
That was the goal.
Now, you said that there was some competition that Mr. Menendez, Jose Menendez, fostered between the brothers. And you had indicated that he would have a competition between them brushing their teeth the fastest and getting into bed the fastest, correct?
One more time.
You were talking about a competition that Mr. Menendez had the brothers compete.
Okay.
You had indicated, for example, he would tell them to go brush their teeth, and whoever could brush their teeth fastest would be the winner.
Correct.
And there was other motivating tools that he used for them to race into getting into bed first, correct?
Yes.
So he would kind of use these tools to get them to do things faster. Would that be fair to say?
Not
It's
faster.
competition?
It's competition.
Okay. And that would include getting to the dinner table. If he called the brothers to dinner, there'd be a competition to see who can get to the dinner table the fastest?
No,
Would that be fair to say?
no.
Now, Mr. Anderson, you indicated that you spent several summers with the Menendez family. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you've indicated at least 2 times, one in 1975 and one in 1977 at the Muncie home. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, there were other times that you spent the summers with the Menendez family. Is that right?
Yes.
Where and when were those other visits, these summer visits that you had?
The one summer visit was my first one in Cedar Grove.
Okay, let's take it one at a time. Cedar Grove, was that the first one?
As far as for now, are we looking at, you have to be more descriptive as far as what time frame and how long of a period was I staying at these homes?
Yes. First of all, you have to establish where you were, and then I'll ask you the question about how long you were there. So let's get back to the Cedar Grove, New Jersey house. What year was it that you went to that house to stay?
Eric was not born. It would have to be 70, 69, 70.
Okay, and was this in the summertime that you went to visit?
Yes.
How long did you stay on that occasion?
On that particular occasion, I ended up only staying there for about a month because I hurt myself badly.
You hurt yourself?
Yes.
How did you hurt yourself?
I sprained my neck jumping into the pool that was not filled all the way
And where was this at?
in the backyard.
Did you jump into the pool on the shallow end?
There was no shallow end. It was just up above the ground. The pool, it was all one depth.
Oops. Okay, so you spent a month on that occasion with the family. And what was the next time that you visited in the summer?
The next time that I revisited them for a length of time would be in 75 when I lived them at the Muncie house.
And how many months did you spend that summer?
The whole summer. The entire spread of the summer, 3.5, 4 months.
3.5 or 4 months. And then you were also a visitor in 1977?
Correct.
And how many months were you there?
Same.
3.5 to 4 months?
Correct. The whole summer.
Were there then 3 times that you visited the Menendez family at their home in the summer? Were those the only times?
In the summers, yes.
Okay.
Except for, but in 77, I assisted in them moving to Princeton Junction.
Okay. Now, you indicated that there were times when you got disciplined by Mr. Menendez.
Yes.
And there were times when you weren't sure why you were disciplined. Would that be fair to say?
On some occasions, yes.
There were times when it was clear why you got disciplined.
Yes.
Okay. Now, you had indicated in direct examination your opinions about the defendants during that period of time. Do you remember talking to the defense attorneys in this case on April 26, 1992 at Oak Lawn, Illinois? Jill Nansen and Leslie Abramson?
All right. No, really, as far as the exhibits, those exhibits that are received in evidence will all be in the jury room, and you'll get them at one time. It's really too cumbersome to have them be distributed at this point. All right, let's take a recess then, since apparently the examination will be for quite a while yet. So don't discuss this case with anyone. Don't form any final opinions about it, and we'll resume at 15 minutes after 3. That's 3:15. All right, everyone is present, and the witness is still on the witness stand. Mr. Kuriyama.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Anderson, I'm going to take you back to your first visit with the Menendez family in Cedar Grove for that 1 month period. Would you describe for the jurors what that visit was like for you?
At that time, it was a very carefree type of environment. From what I can remember of that incident, is nothing very strangely out of the ordinary.
In fact, you told the defense attorneys that
Your Honor, I can object. I don't think there's any.
Why don't you just ask the question?
Did you indicate that it was a happy house with no pressure?
Still calling for hearsay.
Right, why don't you just ask the question? Would he describe it in that way?
Okay. Would you describe that household when you first made your visit to the Menendez household in Cedar Grove, the first time you went to stay in the summer? Would you describe that as a happy house with no pressure?
No.
Did you describe it that way when you spoke to the defense attorneys in this case?
It wasn't exactly it wasn't exactly an extremely happy household. There was happy times.
Mr. Anderson, I said it was a happy house with no pressure, not an extremely happy house. Is that how you characterized it?
At that point, no, I don't remember any extreme pressure, no.
In fact, you had indicated that it was a happy house with no pressure.
No, there was some, but nothing extremely, no. Nothing that stands out in mind as far as extreme pressure, no.
Is there anything that stands out in your mind with respect to any kind of pressure whatsoever?
No.
Now, in 1975, you went to visit the Menendez home again for this 3.5 to 4 months, and then again in 1977, correct?
Yes.
There was something you liked about going to the Menendez house, I take it, for the summers?
Yes.
What was that?
Just getting away from my neighborhood where I lived and being with Lyle, mostly.
You had fun with the Menendez family?
I had fun with Lyle and Eric.
And you enjoyed your times with the Menendez family? Those 3 occasions that you've discussed?
And I enjoyed my times with my cousins.
In fact, in 1975, did you see any interaction between, you've already discussed interaction between Jose Menendez and the brothers. Did you see any interaction between, first of all, Kitty Menendez and Eric Menendez?
No.
Did you see Eric Menendez ever hold on to his mother's legs?
Yes.
And did you further see Mrs. Kitty Menendez, pat her son on the head?
Yes.
So you saw some interaction with the family,
It was
correct?
the type of interaction that I know of was that the only time that I remember Eric running and hugging his mother's leg was in the fact that he was about to be disciplined. He just didn't willfully run up to his mother, as you say, and just to hug his leg. No.
His mother was protective of him the time that you saw her. Is that correct?
In 75.
Now, you've indicated that there were times when you and the brothers were disciplined, correct?
Yes.
Would you describe the way that you conducted yourself during these visits?
In what manner, as far as when I was being disciplined?
Well, in order to get disciplined, did you misbehave?
Yes.
And you're a handful. Would that be fair to say?
I was, yeah, you could say I was a handful.
And did you characterize yourself as being mischievous?
Yes.
And did you characterize the relationship you had with the brothers, that you and the boys would do lots of things which could be considered malicious?
Not malicious, mischievous.
Malicious. Did you characterize it that way?
Not, how do you define malicious? How do you want me to define malicious?
Perhaps would it refresh your present recollection to take a look at the defense report, the interview that you gave on April 26, 1992?
If you wish.
Okay. May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
show you defense report dated April 26, 1992, the second page. I'm going to ask you to read the highlighted portion.
The orange highlighted?
Orange, yes.
That was the first to admit.
Okay, just read it to yourself.
Oh. It says malicious there.
Yes, Mr. Anderson, does that refresh your present recollection, sir?
Yes.
Did you indicate to your defense counsel that you and the boys would do lots of things which could be considered malicious?
Yes.
And you gave one example of an incident where the three of you cut all the flowers off the plants.
Not the three of us, no, just myself.
Okay. Does this
The bo-
indicate that it was the three of you that did that? Is this an error? This is what
The
you
three of us were in, the boys were with me and watched me do it.
Now, did Kitty Menendez get mad at you for cutting all the flowers off from all the plants at the house?
Kitty got mad at me for doing that.
Did you indicate to the defense attorneys that Kitty never got upset with you about that?
She never got upset about a lot of different things. She would at times blow a lot of things up, but for that particular incident, yes, she did get upset with me.
Okay, so as you've indicated, you were mischievous and malicious, correct? While you visited with the Menendez family, correct?
The word malicious is not considered, I was not always malicious as the proof definition of the word malicious is.
There were
I was more so mischievous, and that was probably the word I should have used.
Okay. Now, you also indicated that you were a smoker during that period of time, correct?
Yes.
Did the Menendez parents know that you were smoking?
No.
They didn't. Was there any time that they ever found out that you were smoking?
There was one instance where we were down in the garage, Lyle and myself, and I had lit up a cigarette, and I heard Kitty coming, and I put that cigarette out. She smelled the smoke.
Obviously, cigarette smoke.
Yes.
Now, how old were you?
Myself?
Yes.
I was 12.
12 years old. And did Kitty Menendez get a little upset that there had been...
She asked who was smoking.
Just let me ask the question.
I'm
please.
sorry.
Did Kitty Menendez ever become upset with you for smoking in the garage at that period of time?
She did not get upset with just myself. She got upset with the fact that she smelled the smoke. I wanted to know which one of us were smoking. Both Lyle and myself didn't confess at all.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Both Lyle and myself did not confess at all. We clammed up. We would not talk to her about it.
So she didn't know
Who?
which or both, whether both of you were smoking. Now.
Correct.
Now, you also related an incident where you and Lyle Menendez had a rock throwing fight,
Right.
correct?
Yes.
And it was a situation where you threw a rock and you injured Lyle Menendez in the face.
Yes.
Now, when Mr. Jose Menendez came home, he didn't slap you upside your head, did he?
No.
He sent you to your room.
First, he verbally gave me a very good verbal discipline before sending me to my room, then locking the door thereafter.
Okay, and you had indicated that you believed that you didn't get fed. Is that right?
I'm not understanding your questioning as far as when that was.
After Mr. Menendez came home and saw that his son Lyle had been severely injured by a rock thrown by you in a rock fight,
Mm-hmm.
he
Yes.
reprimanded you, correct?
Yes.
He never physically harmed you in any way, did he?
Objection, has to be answered.
He sent,
He said he yelled at me for what I did and sent me to my room and locked the door.
okay. Now, on direct examination, you said that you believed that you were not fed. You were just simply locked in the room.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you remember telling the defense attorneys on April 26, 1992,
Page and section.
actually April 27th, 1992. It's the last page. The first full paragraph. Do you recall being interviewed on successive days in Oaklawn,
Objection. I don't see
Illinois?
what you're talking about.
Right, regardless of that, that's not a legal objection. We'll point to the particular portion, Mr. Friella.
Yes, Your Honor. Did you indicate
Can we have a minute, Your Honor, to find what it's
Sure,
trying to
sure.
it's the last page? Yeah, you don't have to do it. It's the last page of the 27th report. Counsel ready?
No. Okay, I'd like a page.
It's the first, yes. I don't have numbers on mine.
Right.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Anderson, do you recall stating to the defense attorneys that after this rock throwing incident where you hurt Lyle Menendez, that Jose got home and sent you to your room?
Yes,
And you had to stay there for 2 days and could only leave when you asked Kitty to go to the bathroom?
for that length of time, yes, yes.
And
That was a
that
very
you-
severe punishment to him.
That you ate the meals that she brought to you in the room,
The
correct?
first night, I did not have any meals.
Were you fed at any time during that
The
period?
second day, about the day, after the night went by and was into the morning of the next day, yes,
So you do remember that now?
yes,
And you indicated that Jose said that he should send you home for starting to throw rocks,
yes.
that it was dangerous.
That I hurt, no, not that I threw rocks, but that I hurt Lyle and that I would do something of that nature.
Did he in fact send you home early?
No.
He allowed you to stay with the family on, correct?
That was after a phone call was made to my father, which he insisted Kitty to make a phone call to my father.
And your father was notified of what you had done?
Objection, our cost reducer.
Sustained.
There was a call made to your father.
To just tell him what I did, yes.
Now, Mr. Anderson, you indicated that there was a difference between the discipline that you received as opposed to what Eric and Lyle Menendez received, correct?
Yes,
You weren't the son of Jose Menendez.
correct.
Objection,
You-
argumentative.
Overruled.
Now, you did indicate, however, that you had been disciplined with a belt, correct?
No,
Ever?
no, I was threatened with it, but I was never hit with
Who were
it.
you threatened with the belt?
By Jose.
I believe in direct examination, you indicated that you had been in discipline. You had, a belt had been used against you. Is that correct?
Your Honor, that's misstating the evidence.
All right, are you asking that it was done by Mr. Menendez or by
No,
someone
no.
else?
Did somebody else use a belt in disciplining you?
No,
Now, your parents, according to this chart, are Brian and Pat Anderson, correct?
yes,
Now, you indicated that you were frightened when Kitty Menendez was throwing these dishes in the sink, correct?
at first, yes, I was quite startled.
Now, in these incidents, she never physically harmed you, did she?
No.
Or her sons?
When throwing the dishes, are we talking about now?
Yeah, in the sink.
No, there was nobody. The kids were in the other room.
Okay, so when she got frustrated or mad, she would just throw these dishes.
Yes,
And you, in fact, it would usually be out of the presence of the brothers, is that correct?
We'd be in the other room watching TV.
Okay, so you weren't physically right there when it happened?
No. I'd have to come into the room to see it.
Now, what else is it that you liked so much about the Menendez home that you wanted to keep returning to visit with them during the summers?
The second year in 77, it's not that I wanted to go back. It's just that my father told me I was going there.
Your father told you were going there?
Yes. And also I did like to be with Lyle.
Okay.
And there was another reason because he had told me that I was going to Kitty and Jose's for the summer. And I was excited for the fact that I was going to be with Lyle. I always thought more of Lyle than I did of Eric.
He was much closer in age to you, is that correct?
Correct.
You were 6 years older than Lyle and about 9 years older than Eric, correct?
Correct.
Now, why is it that your father wanted you to go to the Menendez house?
Objection, possible speculation.
Sustained.
Did your father ever tell you why he wanted you to go?
No.
Overruled.
Had you been acting up at home so that he wanted you to go away for the summer?
Your Honor, objection, speculation, so his father never told him why he was sent home.
Objection sustained to the form of the question.
Mr. Anderson, do you know why your father wanted you to go to the Menendez house?
No.
1975? You have no idea?
No. He just asked me if it's something I wanted to do after I argued the fact. And then I finally said, yeah, that sounds like a fun idea. Because he described things that I would be doing with the family.
And was that in 1975?
No, I was in 77.
77? In fact, isn't it true that Jose Menendez paid for tennis lessons for you as well as his own sons?
He wasn't just,
Form of the question, Your Honor, for the
Overruled.
Is
You
that
can answer the
correct?
question.
yes.
And did he pay for you to have lessons with a tennis professional named Roscoe Tanner?
Yes, but briefly. It was a very brief encounter. If I may say, it was less than an
There's
hour.
no question pending. You know, there were often times, as you have indicated, that Jose Menendez would want to speak to Lyle alone. Is that correct? Fair to
Yes.
say? And in fact, if there was disciplining to be done, he would not do it in anyone else's presence. He would usually take Lyle to another room. Is that correct?
Yes.
He didn't want to embarrass Lyle in front of all these people, did he?
objection, possible speculation.
Sustained.
Now, you've indicated that when you went to Kitty Menendez, let me ask you this. If you ever had a problem with discipline from Jose Menendez in the form of going to your room, would you ever go to your Aunt Kitty and ask for help in that regard?
Yes.
And would she give you help?
No, because she told me no.
Didn't you tell the defense attorneys, page 4, second paragraph of the April 26, 1992 interview,
I'm going to object that, Your Honor, because it's not impeachment.
What line?
Your Honor, it's the second paragraph, the second sentence.
Overruled.
Thank you, Your Honor. Did,
Overruled.
Mr. Anderson, isn't it true that you told the defense attorneys in this case that if you had problems with Jose, you would talk to Kitty about it and she would frequently be able to help you out?
This objection is vague as to time, which house is talking about.
Overruled.
Is it-
Is that correct, Mr. Anderson?
At times, Kitty would help me, yes.
Now, during the period of time that you were there during these 3 summers, Mr. Anderson, you never saw any physical or any sexual abuse, did you?
Objections compound.
Rephrase the question.
Mr. Anderson, during the period of time that you were at these houses, you never saw any sexual abuse, did you?
We were not allowed in the room.
You saw no sexual abuse, is that correct?
If you don't want to consider the showers that they took together after they were playing tennis, I found kind of strange.
Did you see any evidence of sexual abuse yourself?
We were not allowed in the room.
Answer the question.
No.
In fact, you told the defense attorneys that you never saw anything like that. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Now, how would you describe the brothers in your later visits? That is, in 1975 and 1977.
And which brother?
Well, let's take Lyle Menendez first. How would you describe the way that he behaved?
He was a curious kid that just took my lead for a lot of cases, and he was not afraid to do things that I did.
And
As far as his personality is concerned, he, to me, looked the same, was acting the same between 75 and 77.
And how would you describe Eric Menendez during that period of time?
There was a radical difference in him. He, at 75, was more outgoing. He was a lot more caring, more thing to be around, more fun to be around. But in 77, I was shocked by such the introvert that he became. He would close me out. He would go off and play by himself.
Mr. Anderson?
Excuse me, Your Honor, did the witness finish answering the question?
Yes, had you completed your answer?
No, I have not. You would try to talk with Eric, and he would not want to talk. Like, how are things going? I haven't seen you in a while. How is your tennis? What's new, type of thing. He did not want to talk. He was almost like a scared to talk to me.
Now, this is when he was, 5 years old?
No, this was in 77. He'd be 6.5 or so.
Did you describe the brothers a little differently in your interview with the defense attorneys on April 26, 1992?
I may have used different words, maybe, or something.
May I refresh your present recollection? May I approach you on page 4, the second to the last paragraph? 26.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to this because it is a compound description.
All right, objection overruled. At this point, he's just being shown something to refresh his recollection.
Right.
Well, that's after the visit was established.
Mr. Anderson, does that refresh your present recollection as to what took place? Or how you characterize the brothers?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to the question again, calling for a compound answer.
Overruled.
Does that refresh your recollection, sir?
The initial,
Question is just, does it refresh your recollection?
yes.
It does. Did you tell the defense attorneys,
I'm going to object. May we approach?
Not at this time.
Mr. Anderson,
Well,
did
Your Honor,
you?
we can't make a record or prevent prejudicial information.
Not at this time.
Approach.
Objection
Mr.
is
Anderson?
overruled. You may ask the question.
Thank you, Your Honor. Did you tell the defense attorneys in describing the brothers that the brothers were,
Objection misstates the information in the report. Doesn't use the word brothers.
All right, counsel is correct. Why don't you
Your
rephrase the
Honor.
question?
thank you, Your Honor. I'm going to read this verbatim. Okay, Mr.
I'm
Anderson?
still objecting, Your Honor, that it's a joint description.
Well, first of all, you asked the witness to refresh his recollection. He said yes. So why don't we find out how it's been refreshed?
Did this passage that you've read refresh your recollection as to what you told the defense attorneys?
After time spending with the boys after being there in 77, not the initial contact.
Okay. After being with the brothers in 1977, you formed this opinion as reflected on page 4 of the report of April 6th. Is that correct?
That is what had developed by their personality as I lived in the house.
Okay. And did you describe the boys as being hyper, looking for attention, highly emotional, vindictive, angry, and destructive of property.
Yes,
And is that an accurate reflection of what the brothers were like?
yes. In 77 when I came back to visit.
Thank you. Now, you've indicated that you were grounded at times and sent to your room, correct?
Yes,
And you were kept from actually interacting with the brothers on occasions. Is that
yes,
correct? And that's because of misbehavior. Is that fair to say?
on my part, yes.
Would Jose Menendez, in addition to spending time with his sons with regard to asking them questions about current events and with tennis, would he also be involved in other activities with the brothers?
No, not that I can recall. Not that I can really recall.
Mr. Anderson, do you recall when Mr. Menendez wanted to teach the brothers how to box, how to protect themselves?
Yes.
And he spent time working with the brothers, is that correct?
Well, it was quite frequent, yes.
Okay, and you saw this interaction.
Yes.
Mr. Anderson, you also indicated in direct examination that Kitty Menendez was a reckless driver,
Yes.
drove kind of fast,
Oh, yes.
and you indicated that, or did you indicate that the brothers were not wearing seatbelts?
Yes.
Were there seatbelts in the car at that time?
Oh, yes.
What year was that car?
I don't know, 77, 75, when I went to visit in Hinsdale, when I went to visit the Cedar Grove house.
Was it you? I think you referred to a Jaguar.
Mm-hmm.
Was that a brand new car?
No. Oh,
It
no.
was an older model.
Oh, no, that was an older model, yeah.
Did it have seatbelts in it?
No.
Okay. Mr. Anderson, isn't it true that you were disappointed when you weren't invited back after 1977 by the Menendez family to visit during the summer vacations?
You could say yes, I was disappointed.
In fact, you were unhappy about that, weren't you?
Not fully after after things were explained to me as to what was going on. They were in the process of moving. The boys were getting more involved in sports. There was no time for them to actually have any freedom for me to be there.
So, in fact, you were so upset about it that you wanted an explanation why you couldn't come back to the Menendez house and visit with them summers subsequent to 1977, correct?
Objection argument.
Overruled.
I don't remember. You have to ask me who am I who's talking with me. I don't understand who's trying to. I don't understand who I'm talking to at this point. Is it with my father? Is it with Kitty? Is it with?
Let me direct your attention to your interview with the defense attorneys on April 27th, 1992. The second page. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson, I'm going to show you a report, an interview with yourself with the defense attorneys, Leslie Abramson and Jill Lansing. This occurred on April 27th, 1992 in Oak Lawn, correct? If you would read the highlighted portion.
Your objection is what?
My objection is that what's being shown to the witness is not impeachment.
Objection overruled. At this point, it's just being shown to the witness. You may look at it. Just read it to yourself.
Mr. Anderson, does that refresh your present recollection as to what occurred after your visits to the Menendez home in 1977?
I can remember sitting at the kitchen table with my father and talking about why I was going back. And that was his explanation for him talking with Kitty.
Does the report indicate that,
Your Honor, I'm going to object. This is a conclusion by the witness.
All right, you're asking for you're objecting to the answer as a conclusion?
Yes.
All right, the objection is sustained. The answer is stricken. Your next question, please.
thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Anderson, did you ever communicate to Kitty Menendez that you were unhappy about not being asked for the summer to spend the summer with the Menendez household?
On the phone,
You spoke to Kitty Menendez?
after my father called her.
Okay. And you indicated that you were unhappy that you weren't invited back?
Yes. It was a very brief conversation. I remember it.
I mean, so after these 3 times that you went for these summer vacations, you wanted to go back.
I wanted to go back and be with my cousins.
Okay. Thank you. I have nothing further at this time, Your Honor.
All right, any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Anderson, you were asked if you had seen any sexual abuse while you were living in the house? Is that correct? Remember being asked that by the
Yes.
prosecution? And your answer was you were not allowed in the room. What did you mean by that?
As soon as Jose took either one of the boys into their room, the door was locked behind him. And Kitty made it very clear that you did not go down the hallway to listen or go near that door. So we were not allowed in or near the room.
And would Kitty walk in and out of that room?
No, Kitty was not even allowed in the room.
And you made some reference to you thought that the situation with showers was a little unusual.
I found it to be very unusual, being the age that Lyle was, he could shower himself. And Eric being the age that he was, I've seen him numerous times go into the bathroom and take baths or showers by himself. After tennis matches, we would come home. Jose and the 2 boys would go into the shower in their room,
In whose room?
in the parents' room.
Was this a family in which there was a lot of warmth displayed?
Oh, God, no,
Was there hugging?
no,
Were there pet names or gentle voices used?
no.
You were asked about the incident in which Kitty was throwing the dishes into the sink. And you described the clutching of the fists and, do you remember that? All the
Yes.
behavior that went with it? Was she a small woman or
No. Oh, no, she was very physically fit.
was she strong?
Yes, very strong.
You were asked about the punishment that you received. And you indicated you were never hit with a belt. You were sent to your room. Is that correct?
Yes, I was verbally yelled at and then sent to my room with the door locked behind me.
Now, when you were verbally yelled at, were you told that your behavior was bad or that there was something wrong with you?
I was very much belittled to the fact that because of the neighborhood I came from was that to be the cause for the fact of how I was.
Did you come from a very dangerous neighborhood?
Very rough neighborhood, yes. Very lower middle class. Well, the area that we lived in, but the area they hung around in was lower middle class, upper lower class.
And so they were condemning you because of your exposure to people who were lower middle class?
Oh, yes, very much so.
Excuse me. Among the punishments, were you ever sent to do projects as a form of punishment?
Yes.
And was there an incident in particular that stands out in your mind?
The pond in the backyard.
Now, what was the pond in the backyard? Can you describe it for me?
The pond was off to the side of the house, and it was a concrete pond, shallow pond, that was, the rocks were in the pond. The rocks throughout, they bought the house with the rocks in the pond and never did anything with it. And he had sent me out there to remove all the rocks from the pond, which took me days to do.
If you'll stop a minute, let me show you a photograph. Your Honor, I'd like to mark this as next in order.
157,
Thank you. May I approach?
yes.
Mr. Anderson, showing you what we've marked as 157, does that appear to be the pond you're referring to?
Yes.
Okay, so Jose sent you out there to take the rocks out of the pond?
Yes.
And,
No, he didn't send me. He told me I was going out there to do that.
and how long did it take you to get all the rocks out of the pond?
It took me about 3 days.
After you got the rocks out of the pond, what did you do next?
I proceeded to scrub the pond and fill it with water.
And what happened after you filled it with water?
I was told to take the water out of the pond with a gallon bucket.
And how long did that take you?
It took me about 2 days to do all that
And why were you told to take the water out of the pond?
because Jose wanted to paint it.
After you took the water out of the pond, did he ever paint it?
No, he lost interest in the project.
The district attorney asked you if there was a difference between when you went to the Cedar Grove house and when you went to the Muncie house in 1977. Is there a difference in what that family was like? Is that a confusing question? May I rephrase it, Your Honor?
Sure.
You indicated that in 1975, when you went to the Cedar Grove house in which they lived in 1969 and 1970, that it was a happy home.
Yes, it very much appeared to be that way.
Okay. Was it different in 1977?
Very much. The atmosphere in the family was extremely tense.
Objection to that question.
All right, your next question.
The district attorney asked you about your use of the word malicious.
Yes, he did.
And in talking about malicious, you talked about cutting the flowers off of the plants. Is that correct?
Leaving the stems, yes.
And is that your definition of malicious behavior?
No, should have been. I should have stated mischievous. I instead of saying malicious.
Was there anything about the eye injury that Lyle sustained that upset the parents with regard to his ability to play tennis?
Oh, they were very concerned that he would not be able to.
Beyond the scope of process, when asked me to direct.
Overall,
They were very concerned that Lyle would not be able to see correctly out of that eye, and would very much be detrimental to the fact that he would not be able to professionally play tennis, having that impairment. And that I just totally ruined his career as a tennis if his eye would not heal properly. And all the time and money that they spent grooming him in tennis was all for what? For naught, if his eye would not be correctly, if his vision was not correctly responded after it healed.
You were asked about Jose paying for tennis lessons for you. Was this an extended program, or how many tennis lessons did you take?
Not very many at all. The only reason why that it all happened was that they would not leave me home alone to go. They wanted me, because I was there to be with my cousins. The main purpose of the trip was for me to go there to be with my cousins. And so in order for me to be with my cousins, which then he already had paid for this training for them, he paid for training for myself so that I could be, which then I never was with them when I got there. I was put in a general group.
Okay. Was there some difference in the lessons that were provided for the boys and the lessons that you received?
Oh, very much so. Like I stated earlier, I was put in a very general group away from the boys. And the
what-
boys had a private trainer.
And was your coach given any particular instructions in terms of how hard he should work with you?
Nah, it was, hey, he's here, just keep him busy, pretty much. Because I wasn't going to be there for the whole summer. So there was no sense in him getting into depth with me because it was going to be, I was just there. That was the main reason for it.
So would it be fair to say that they had a particular objective in mind with regard to the boys, but no purpose, no similar purpose?
No, they made it clear there was no purpose. I was just there because, number one, they didn't want to leave me home alone, me being a new person to the neighborhood and so on and so forth. And also that I could be with the boys, but and what it came out to be was I never was with the boys. I was in the same building as the boys, but never with the boys, never interacting with them.
Okay. And Mr. Kuriyama asked you if when you were punished, it was because you misbehaved. Is that correct?
Yes.
And were these major acts of misbehavior, or would they sometimes be very minor things?
It could have been anything. Jose did not tolerate any mischievous acts at all.
You were asked about Jose spending time teaching the boys to box. Did he encourage the boys to fight with each other?
Yes, he did.
And did he encourage Lyle to fight with you?
Yes, he did.
And you were significantly older.
I was significantly bigger also, yes. I had to go to my knees. I could not stand up. I had to be on my knees.
And Eric was significantly younger even than Lyle.
Yes.
Was this formalized boxing training or was this fighting?
It was, we were given small pillows to clutch in our hands. And then that's what we would box with.
And would he watch you and give instructions to you as you were boxing?
Yes, he would tell us how to hit, where to hit, how hard to hit, and then we would take it from there.
Would he tell you to hit hard?
Yes, at times.
What was the purpose?
I would not. I would not. I would always hold back. It was one of the things that Jose just didn't like about me, is that I wouldn't compete to that level with them.
What was the purpose of this fighting?
Self-defense.
Did they have to learn to be tough?
Yes. To accept pain.
Accept pain. When you were asked about the reckless driving, you said there were no car seats. No seatbelts. Did Lyle have a car seat?
No, we got what instance? What are you talking?
We're talking about the Jaguar incident.
No, he was on my lap.
And this is in Cedar Grove.
Yes.
And this is when he's about 2 years old.
Yes.
You said you were not invited back because there was no time for freedom. Was the Menendez house a place where the neighborhood kids gathered and came inside and played and there was unstructured play?
Never.
Did you ever see neighborhood kids inside the house?
Never.
Did the boys have free time for unstructured play?
Only when I was able to get them off the yard without Kitty knowing about it. Or if I went to Kitty when Jose was not home, I said, can Lyle please come over? And it was a neighbor boy that I happened to befriend. Now, I was allowed to leave the property, to go to the neighbor boy's house. But I was the only person. I had to ask Kitty for permission to take Lyle, but not allowed to take Eric with. Eric was never allowed to leave the property.
Okay. And I think you described for the prosecution Eric holding on to his mother's leg and her patting him on the head. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you ever see her do anything more than that in terms of gestures of affection?
No, both her or Jose did not show affection. They did not hug, did not say I love you, did not any of the things that I was used to. No.
Okay. Thank you. I have nothing further.
Anything else?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mr. Anderson, did you love your Aunt Kitty?
Yes.
And when we first came to see you in Oak Lawn, Illinois, in was it April of
27, 26.
'92? You had never met me or Miss Lansing before.
No.
And do you feel loyal to your family?
To my immediate family, I
Yeah.
feel loyal to my wife and my children.
Well, you feel loyal to your wife and children, do you not?
Yes.
And did you feel, over the course of growing up, did you feel that a person should be loyal to their family as well?
As any kid would think, yes.
Okay. And did you feel badly when your Aunt Kitty died?
Extremely bad.
And did you like your cousins, Eric and Lyle?
I love my cousins, Eric and Lyle.
And did you find it hard to believe when we discussed it with you that Eric and Lyle had killed their parents?
I find
No relevance.
Objection sustained. The answer is stricken.
Now, since we interviewed you in April, have you spent a fair amount of time thinking about those days that you spent in your Aunt Kitty's house?
yes.
And have details and memories come to you since that first day that we talked to you?
I guess.
Okay. I wanted to ask you this. Ms. Lansing just asked you about Aunt Kitty's driving. Was she always a fast and reckless driver?
She was always in a hurry to get nowhere.
Okay. Was she always late in getting nowhere as well?
Always. Always.
But the things that stood out in your mind are these episodes when she would purposely go out joyriding, she called it?
Objection, leading from state savings.
Objection sustained.
Does it stand out in your mind that on occasion she would announce that she wanted to take a joyride?
That when I stated that, that was the only time I remember saying that word joy ride. Other times she would say, let's go for a ride.
For a ride. And would these be particularly reckless?
Oh, they would. Yes.
Okay. Now, I just want to go over these words that were read to you by Mr. Kuriyama when you were describing the boys, and you said this was things that you observed during the 1977 visit, okay? You said the boys were hyper. Now, first, I'd like you to distinguish, if you can, between Eric and Lyle, okay? But very first, what did you mean by hyper?
Very excitable. Happy to see me. Extremely happy to see me. Just in general, they were extremely happy to see me. I just consider that hyper. They were real up, just real happy.
Okay. Well, sometimes people use the word hyper like hyperactive. Is that what you meant?
No.
Okay. Did they have difficulty sitting still?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Did they need to move a lot and be physically active?
Yes.
When their father was around, and he wanted them to sit still, did they sit still?
They sat still.
In fact, when their father was around, if he ordered them to do something, did they do it?
Myself?
Did they do it?
When I asked them to do something?
No. When Jose was around, if he ordered the boys to do something, did they do it?
Oh.
Beyond scope,
I'm sorry?
beyond scope.
Objection overruled.
Oh, yes. They, as soon as their father snapped his fingers and gave them a direct, they went off to do it.
So they were very obedient to his commands, were they?
Oh,
not?
very, very obedient.
Now, the next thing you said was that the boys were looking for attention. Was that both boys?
More so Lyle than Eric.
And was Lyle looking for attention from whom?
Myself.
Okay. So Lyle would come to you and interact with you more than Eric.
Yes.
Now, the next thing you said was that they were highly emotional. Were they both highly emotional?
Eric, 99% more than Lyle.
Was Eric a crybaby?
To the true word of crybaby,
Did he cry and whine a
he
lot?
cried and whined a lot
Did he kind of annoy you because he was a cry and whiny baby?
at times.
Did you ever hear his father call him sissy?
He called, well, not exactly the word sissy. He called him baby.
When he would be upset or crying or whining?
He could, yes.
Now, you also use the word vindictive. What did you mean by that? How is a 6.5-year-old, for example, vindictive?
To me, the way I used that was in Lyle had a temper. I have a temper. So I was able to relate to Lyle in that aspect. I used that word because when I would get mad, I would want to cut the flowers off. I was upset with something, and so I cut the flowers off.
And would Lyle, when he would get upset and mad, also do things like that?
He'd go outside and beat up a tree or beat up a log or something in the yard. He'd tear his doll apart, do stuff like that.
So when he was angry, he would react in some way.
At an inanimate object, yes.
At an inanimate object. And that's what you meant by that word.
Yes.
You didn't apply that word to Eric?
Eric would just cry, or he would go off in a corner and just be by himself.
Okay. Now, when you said that they were angry, was this being applied to both of them?
More so Lyle than Eric.
And would Lyle tend to be angry after the parents had done something to him or said
Extremely.
something to him? Was that when he'd seem angry?
Yes.
And concerning their being destructive of property, was that true of both of them?
More so Lyle. But yes, both, yes.
Okay. Did they break things a lot?
And playing with them, yes. And in cases of just, yeah, okay, yes.
Now, this fighting that Jose encouraged them to engage in, did they get hurt?
We used to swing pretty hard. You can say we used to make each other cry.
Would Eric get hurt, for example, if Lyle was fighting with him?
Yeah, they would. The competitiveness would get over extreme.
Well, Jose was encouraging this, wasn't he?
Exactly.
And if Lyle was hurting his little brother, Jose didn't stop it, did he?
No.
In fact, if you were inadvertently...
Counsel, let's not lead the witness.
Okay, if you were hurting one of the boys, you who are so much older, in front of Jose in this encouragement, would Jose stop you?
Jose would not stop me. He would instruct the boys how to deflect the punch or how to take the punch.
Did you ever hear Jose telling either of the boys to attack the other boy from behind or catch him unaware or
The element
teach him
of
how to fight dirty?
Yes, the element of surprise was a factor. Such as if you were to throw your arm out this way from the view with the arm, you led with the right.
So he was trying to teach them how to fake out opponents?
Exactly.
Did you ever hear him encourage Eric, for example, to hit Lyle in the back?
In the back and below the belt.
Okay.
I'm sorry, in the back and.
Below
Or
the
below
belt.
the belt?
Because of their vulnerable areas, the kidney, the back, lower back on both either side or the groin area. Those vulnerable areas to a male.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. I have nothing to say.
Any recross?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Mr. Anderson, with respect to the last time that you were at the Menendez house and you were on your knees because you were so much bigger than the brothers and you had these pillows on your hand, the brothers were what, about 6 and 9 years old?
Yes. 77.
You were how old?
I was 12.
Okay.
I was 12, wasn't I? I'm trying to get my bearing here. 70. I'm not good with ages and when. I'm sorry. I will admit that.
1977.
Okay.
You were quite a bit older than both Eric and Lyle.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Okay, so if they were 6 and 9 during that year.
I'd be 15, 16 years old.
Now, you had indicated that you were so much bigger than even the older brother, Lyle, that you had to get on your knees to have these pillows on your hands.
Mm-hmm. Well, we all had pillows.
Spar. Okay. Now, when they were little boys, you were saying that after tennis, they would go and shower with their father, correct?
Correct.
Would the father ask you as a 16-year-old, almost a man, would he ask you to come on in and shower with him?
No.
Okay. Now, at some point later, in fact, first of all,
it was 12 years before the murders that you spent time at the Menendez family household,
I'm going
correct?
to object to counsel referring to the killings as murders.
All right, why don't you rephrase the question? It's ambiguous as to what you're referring to anyway.
Mr. Anderson, you indicated that it was 1977 that you visited on an extended visit with the Menendez family, correct?
Yes,
And it was 12 years later that the killings occurred, correct?
yes,
So it's been 12 years since you had even spent an extended period of time with the family, is that correct?
yes.
Now, after the defendants became adults, did you see them very often?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to this is beyond the scope.
Overall,
The adults, as far as after high school,
Yes.
the boys were both in college and very active, traveling around the country doing tennis. So no, unless I have my own life. So no, I was married at the time.
In fact, when the killings occurred, Lyle was 21 and Eric was almost 19 years old, correct?
Yes,
Now, you had indicated that when you get upset, that you cut off flowers off the plants, correct?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to the form of questions. Argumentative.
overall,
You can answer, Mr. Anderson.
that when I got upset,
Right, you were saying when you get upset, you, for example, cut off the flowers off of plants.
Object to the form of the question. It doesn't say that's what.
overall,
Yes.
overall.
You may
I
answer that.
did cut the flowers off the plants.
And in
heads.
redirect examination, you said that when Lyle would get upset, he would go up and beat up a tree, an inanimate object, correct?
Correct.
And when Kitty Menendez would get upset, she would get mad at an inanimate dish and throw it in a sink, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Final question is, you've indicated that Kitty Menendez was this big, strong lady, correct?
Not immensely big, but she was a fit woman.
She was 5'5", correct?
I don't know what her exact height was.
I mean, looking at her as you sit there, were you afraid of her?
Afraid of Kitty?
Yes.
Objection is to when.
Why don't you clarify that?
You've indicated on redirect examination that Kitty was this big, strong woman. Is that right? Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Isn't it true that she was 5'5"?
Objection, Your Honor. Argumentative.
Overall,
Asked and answered, he's already said he didn't know.
overall.
You can answer.
I don't know how tall she was.
Was she as big as you, sir?
No, she was a little bigger.
She was bigger than you.
Shoulder wise, yes. At the
Okay.
time.
Height size.
No, I was taller.
How tall are you, sir?
I'm 6'2".
Were you over a head taller than Kitty Menendez?
At the time, I was not 6'2". Right now, I'm 6'2".
You've indicated in redirect examination that she was a large, strong woman. Is that right?
That's why I pictured her as a very fit, strong woman.
Okay. Isn't it true when you said you saw her 10 days before the killings? Would that have been August 10th of 1989?
Mm-hmm.
Was she this big, strong, monstrous woman to you then?
Object to the form of the question, Your Honor. It's argumentative.
Rephrase the question, please.
Okay, Your Honor. When you saw her on that last occasion that you actually saw her, on or about the 10th of August, did she look like this big, strong woman to you? This is 10 days before the killings.
No,
Okay,
but
thank you.
I don't think the witness can.
All right, he did. The objection
No further
is
questions.
overall. Anything else?
I just have one additional question.
Yes.
Your Honor. Actually, two. Mr. Anderson, you were asked if you saw the boys again after 1977. Did you see them at a funeral after 1977?
right, yes, my grandmother Anderson's funeral.
And was that 1984?
Yes.
And can you describe for me the behavior of the boys at that funeral?
Oh, it seemed like a circus. It was. I was flabbergasted at how they were. They came in, said hi to all the relatives in a respectful manner, and then were consoled by Jose. The three of them went off and sat on a couch. And then after all was said and done, Jose went and started talking with the other adults in the area, and the boys became very quiet and didn't seem to want to talk as when they first came in. And I
Ask another question.
So they come in together and he sits down, Jose sits down on the couch with them and has a talk with them?
yes,
And after that, do the boys remain on the couch?
no,
What do they do?
they're walking around, but they are more together.
Together meaning Eric and Lyle were together.
Yes.
Were they interacting with people?
When people were coming to them, talking what they were not, I did not see them willfully going to a lot of people, no.
Did their behavior seem different than other people? Was there something unusual about the way they were acting?
Objection calls for a conclusion, Your Honor.
Overall,
They came in as if a person came in from a
that's
wealthy.
not the question.
Was there something unusual about their behavior?
If you give me time to rethink back to the day. You know, if they walked in with heads high
The question was there anything unusual about their behavior? You can say yes
after
or no.
talking with, yes,
Okay, what was unusual after they had the conversation with their father?
their heads were not hung as high as when they first walked in the door.
Did they look sad, angry, happy?
They seemed very displeased with the conversation they had with their father.
And did he appear to still be exercising the kind of control over them that?
Very much so, very much so.
And the only other area I want to ask, you were asked if Kitty seemed big, seemed strong to you. Were you afraid of her when she got mad?
I was very respectful of her.
What about when she went into this clenching the fist and gritting the teeth?
Yes,
Was that
then-
frightening?
Yes, then I was afraid of her.
And this was at 16?
Yes.
Anything else?
Nothing further.
All right, thank you, sir. You may step down. You're excused. Let me see counsel at the sidebar, please, regarding our schedule. And at this point, we'll take our recess until tomorrow at 10 o'clock, ladies and gentlemen, not 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. The lawyers and I will be meeting at 9 o'clock to deal with some matters that will relate to the next several witnesses. So when we do that, there's no need to have you here before 10. So I'd ask that each jury return tomorrow at 10 to your respective jury rooms. It's very important that you continue following the instruction not to discuss this matter among yourselves or with anyone else, not to form any final opinions about it, and not to permit yourselves to be exposed to anything about this case that is outside of the courtroom. You must make your decision based only on the evidence presented to you in the courtroom and my instructions on the law. So we'll see you all back here tomorrow at 10 o'clock. There are a couple of people who've submitted requests for certain portions of days off, and I'll deal with those. I'll have the bailiff speak with you a little further and then get some more information, and then I'll let everybody know what the schedule is. All right, we'll see you all back here tomorrow at 10 o'clock.